And that's a singular honor for me. It's not by accident that this is happening. So welcome to Grenada, Madam Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not about me, this is about all of you and all of us. But I want to say one thing before we start. In 1979, a number of our young people did something that reverberated around the world. Something that it may not have lasted forever, but has, in a world of no cell phone and no internet and no fax machine or nothing like that, has established institutions that today we are very proud of. MNIB, National Insurance Board, and the airport. You know, we should have been the first one signing on to the CCJ. We should have been. I don't know what happened, but given what we did then, we should have been the first. So keep that in the back of your minds with those of you who have all the excuses in the world as to why we shouldn't do it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to invite to the podium at this time the chairman of the CCJ Advisory Committee, Sir Lawrence A. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. Your Excellency Dame Cecil La Grenade, Governor General of Grenada, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, Ministers of Government, Senator the Honorable Chester Humphrey, President of the Senate, Honorable Michael Peer, Speaker of the House of Representatives, other parliamentarians, members of the Diplomatic Corps, other senior government officials, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here this evening to welcome you and also to address you on the Caribbean Court of Justice. This evening, ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a most historic event. We are launching the Caribbean Court of Justice promotional activities. These activities seek to educate the general public about the implications of having the CCJ as the final court of justice for Grenada instead of the Privy Council. Later on this year, a referendum is scheduled to be held in order for Grenadians to either vote yes or no to this most important proposal. The activities are being spearheaded by the Caribbean Court of Justice Advisory Committee, which committee comprises representatives from a number of governmental as well as non-governmental organizations. This evening, we are pleased to have in our midst Prime Minister the Honorable Mia Mottley of Barbados. Prime Minister Mottley has kindly consented to address us on the related theme, Break the Chains of Colonialism for One United Caribbean. As you may be aware, Barbados has already acceded to having the CCJ as its final court of appeal. Prime Minister Mottley, we welcome you. We welcome you most warmly to the Spice. And as I understand it, Grenada was the home of one of your forebears, Prime Minister Mottley, So this evening we welcome you as a Grenadian Barbadian. Grenada, as many other democratic countries, rely on a well-structured court system. This is necessary in order to resolve the multiplicity of disputes which inevitably arise between parties. These may include disputes involving land, contracts, or matrimonial affairs. The courts provide the avenue for resolving those disputes. The present court system in Grenada comprises magistrates' courts, a high court, a court of appeal, and the Privy Council, which is referred to in Section 104 of the Constitution of Grenada as Her Majesty in Council. It is sometimes referred to as the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. The principle behind Section 104 of the Constitution goes back for many centuries, beginning with the Norman conquest of England by William the Conqueror in 1066 AD. The king was then recognized as the fountain of justice throughout his dominions and exercised jurisdiction by way of his council or curia regis. This curia regis sat in an advisory capacity to the crown. The modern-day concept of that principle was put into legislation in England nearly 200 years ago by the Judicial Committee Act of 1833, which established the Privy Council. In the normal course of delivering decisions, the Privy Council keeps to the traditional formality of advising Her Majesty as to the outcome of their deliberations for transmission to the respective disputing parties. Today, if someone is not satisfied with the decision of a magistrate's court, that person may appeal to the High Court to have the matter reviewed. If that person is still not satisfied with the decision of the High Court, then that person may appeal to the Court of Appeal in accordance with Section 103 of the Grenada Constitution. If still not satisfied with the decision of that court, that person may appeal to the Privy Council in accordance with Section 104 of the Constitution for that court to make a final determination on the issue. The Privy Council is the last court of appeal for Grenada, and it is based in England. It is to be noted that the Privy Council was specifically set up by the British government in order to facilitate the holding of a final court of appeal for its former colonies, like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, certain colonies in the Far East, like Singapore and so on, and the Caribbean. England itself, and please note, England itself does not use the Privy Council as a final court of appeal to hear the normal civil and criminal matters. England has its own final court of appeal. As time went on, when some of these colonies acquired independent status, like Australia, Canada, and others, these countries abandoned the Privy Council and set up their own final court of appeal. Independent countries in the Caribbean, including Grenada, are some of the few former colonies of Great Britain which still have the Privy Council as the final court of appeal. Over the years in the Caribbean, several discussions were held for the purpose of changing this situation. The records show that since 1947, a meeting of West Indian governors mooted the idea of having a West Indian Court of Appeal. In 1970, Jamaica tabled the resolution at the 6th meeting of heads of governments of the Caribbean Community, which was held in Kingston, Jamaica, to establish such a court. However, it was not until 14th of February 2001 in Bridgetown, Barbados, that Grenada, together with other CARICOM countries, signed an agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice. This court has two jurisdictions: an original jurisdiction, which came into being in 2001, and an appellate jurisdiction, which came into being in 2005. Most CARICOM countries, including Grenada, have acceded to the original jurisdiction of the CCJ, which deals with the interpretation and application of the Treaty of Chagaramas, which established CARICOM. However, only Barbados, Belize, Guyana, and Dominica have acceded to its appellate jurisdiction as the final court of appeal instead of the Privy Council. So far, the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ has already made sterling decisions on many important cases in the CARICOM region. In order for Grenada to accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ, the Constitution of Grenada must be amended in accordance with Section 39. This calls for the appropriate bill for an act to be laid in the House of Representatives for 90 days before it is debated and passed by a two-thirds majority of that House, a simple majority support in the Senate, and a two-thirds majority support of all electors voting in a referendum. As a consequence of Section 39 of the Constitution, a bill for an act shortly entitled Constitution of Grenada Caribbean Court of Justice and renaming the Supreme Court Amendment Act 2018 was introduced for first reading in the House of Representatives on 15th of May 2018. It is due to be debated and passed in that House on Friday, 7th September 2018. Subsequently, it has to be passed in the Senate. The main purpose of the bill is to facilitate the amendment of the Constitution in order for the CCJ to be the final court of appeal for Grenada instead of the Privy Council, and to rename the Supreme Court of Grenada as the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, as other OECS countries have already done, instead of the Supreme Court of Grenada and the West Indies Associated States as provided for in Section 105 of the Constitution. There are several good reasons for having Grenada accede to the CCJ as a final court of appeal instead of the Privy Council, and I just mentioned some of them. 1. Grenada will be honoring the treaty obligations having signed the agreement in Barbados on 14 February 2001. 2. The CCJ is more accessible. It is an itinerant court, encourages electronic processing of cases. The headquarters of the court is based in Port of Spain in Trinidad, which is only a few minutes away by air. 3. Urgent matters are tried very swiftly. For example, the case of Professor Eddie Ventus versus the Chief Elections Officer of Barbados, which matter was tried within a matter of days of the matter being filed in court, even on a Sunday. 4. An opportunity to build up a mature Caribbean jurisprudence. Jurisprudence refers to the science of law, which ascertains the principles upon which legal rules are to be determined and settles the manner in which new or doubtful rules should be treated. That is, judges from the region would be more acquainted with our cultural and sociological norms. The Privy Council-based judges would then inevitably accommodate their own norms. 5. The CCJ is less costly. The fact is that unlike the other courts, the Privy Council is based in England. It is highly costly in terms of lawyers' fees, application fees to that court, traveling from Grenada to London, and for accommodation in London for a week or more. It is estimated that in order to take an ordinary run-of-the-mill matter to the Privy Council, an aggrieved person here in Grenada will have to find approximately $150,000. That's approximately 40,000 pounds sterling. This is the main reason that over the years, very few matters have been appealed to the Privy Council from Grenada and indeed from other CARICOM countries. 6. Notice of cessation of Privy Council facilities may be given at any time by the UK government. Some of the judges have already indicated that, in diplomatic British style. Moreover, as I mentioned earlier on, the UK does not use the Privy Council as a final court of appeal. 7. An opportunity to break the chains of colonialism. Grenada is no longer a colony of England. It is an independent state. 8. It's an opportunity to have one united Caribbean, especially in the jurisprudential sphere. All CARICOM countries are willing and able to support the CCJ as indicated in the signed agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice. I submit that the Privy Council is one of the last vestiges of colonialism which exists in Grenada. Even if Grenada received independent status from Britain on 7 February 1974, the Privy Council remains as a distinctive colonial medallion around our necks. Wikipedia has described colonialism as follows. It is the policy of a foreign country seeking to extend or retain its authority over other people or territories, generally with the aim of developing or exploiting them to the benefit of the colonizing country, and or helping the colonies modernize in terms defined by the colonizers. This definition seems quite appropriate in the present context. Grenada is no longer a colony. We have here a proud, independent country. It is time that we break the chains of colonialism and join with our other CARICOM brothers and sisters and have one united Caribbean. In closing, I will just read to you a short poem. It is entitled, Ode to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Break from colonialism. This is what to do. Have a united Caribbean. This is best for you. Break the chains that bind us to the colonial past. We say the Privy Council is the place to start. The Caribbean Court of Justice is our own Caribbean court, giving us good service with decisions of note. Easy access to justice is what we must promote. CCJ deserves it, so get out there and vote. Let's have true independence in the Caribbean. It's time we call the shots and not depend on Britain. One united Caribbean is what we all must want. Let's break the bonds from Britain and rely on our own plans. You say you want justice for the common man? Then rely on the CCJ for the right solution. The Caribbean Court of Justice for the ties that bind. So get in your section and leave the past behind.
That sounds like a kaiso. Or you might hear it later too. Thank you, Sir Lawrence. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you who the members of the CCJ Advisory Committee are. Sir Lawrence A. Joseph as chairman, Mr. Robert Branch, coordinator, Dr. Francis Alexis is part of the steering committee, Senator Simon Steele, steering committee, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, president of the OECS Bar, Ms. Michelle Steele, steering committee, Ms. Afia Joseph, Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Wendy Edmond, GIS, Mr. Kenneth Noel, New National Party, Ms. Claudette Joseph, National Democratic Congress, Mr. Bert Patterson, Trades Union Council, Mr. Devon Rache, Evangelical Churches, Ms. Naisha John Diarra, Conference of Churches, Ms. Sherry Ann Noel, Media Workers Association, Mr. Sheldon Scott, Steering Committee, Ms. Lawrence Griffith, Grenada Bar Association, Ms. Laureen, Griffith, Grenada Bar Association, and Ms. Lillian Sylvester, Office Administrator. And so without further ado, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen all, we invite to the podium Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, President of the OECS Bar Association.
Thank you, Chair. And may I just make a slight correction? I'm the former president of the OECS Bar Association and current president of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations. Governor General, Prime Minister, Speaker, President, Ministers of Government, may I just adopt the entire protocol list. A special welcome, of course, to our guest, Grenadian, Barbadian, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, whom I had the pleasure, maybe 12 years ago, in this very hall, to welcome as she delivered the 7th or 8th Sir Archibald Ned Memorial Lecture. I've been asked to look specifically at the CCJ in the context of independence, the independence of the CCJ, and what has been coined as the professionalism of the Caribbean Court of Justice. And as we all know, there are certain concerns out there expressed at different levels as to whether or not we can trust the CCJ, whether or not there will be interference in the decisions and the operations of the Caribbean Court of Justice, whether the CCJ will really be an independent court, as possibly the Privy Council is perceived to be. And I believe that we must not only tout that the court will be an independent court, but all our citizens must understand in a fundamental way how the court operates. And you will draw your own conclusion as to whether or not this court can be or is an independent court compared to courts all over the world. And my submission is that the CCJ is one of the most independent courts, not just in the Commonwealth, but in the entire world. And why do I say so? It's not an emotional point. Because when you speak independence, principally in relation to your court system, you ask two fundamental questions. One, how is the court financed? And two, who appoints and removes the judges of the court? Are they protected? Do they have security of tenure? And with respect to the Caribbean Court of Justice and the financing of the court, the model has been lauded, and many other courts throughout the Commonwealth have been discussing the adoption of the CCJ model for financing. How is the court financed? Prior to the setting up of the court in 2005, the Caribbean governments, as a result of interventions by regional bar associations, including the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Association and the OECS Bar Association, being concerned with this very issue, made certain submissions which were ultimately adopted by the heads of government. And that was that you set up a trust fund to ensure that the operations of the court are not dependent on handouts from politicians or others throughout the region. And therefore, the model proposed and adopted was that the regional governments will raise $100 million to fund the court. And collectively, the Caribbean governments raised this money and handed it over to the trust fund to fund the operations of the CCJ in perpetuity, means forever and ever. And those were raised through loans, and all the Caribbean governments, to the best of my knowledge, have repaid the loans. So it means, Grenada included, that we are funding a court for the past 13 years. It was established in 2005, and we are not fully utilizing the court. $100 million. So that was handed to a board of trustees, and the board of trustees manages that $100 million. And the charge of the trust fund is to invest those monies so it can multiply and make more money, so you would not have to go to Caribbean governments now or in the future to fund the court. 12 years after, at the end of 2017, the trust fund stood at $87 million. In other words, in 12 years of the entire operations of the court, it was just depleted by $13 million in the context of the international economic climate. And the hope is that that trust fund would continue to grow and grow beyond the $100 million. So that's how the judges are paid. That's how the operations of the court are funded. You do not wait from month to month for a handout or a contribution from a regional government. And who constitutes the trust fund? There are 9 members on the board of trustees, 9 members. And they consist of the following. 1, the Secretary General of CARICOM or his nominee, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies or his nominee, the President of the Insurance Association of the Caribbean, the Chairman of the Association of Indigenous Banks of the Caribbean, the President of the Caribbean Institute of Chartered Accountants, the President of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations, the Chairman of the Conference of Heads of the Judiciary of Member States of the Caribbean Community. So we'll have at least one Chief Justice always on the trust fund, and the President of the Caribbean Association of Industry and Commerce, and the President of the Caribbean Congress of Labor. If you note, a wide and diverse cross-section of professionals are involved in the operations of the CCJ, in the management of that trust fund. If you note, there is no politician or no political figure identified among those 9 persons. They are not responsible for reporting to any politician anywhere in the region. So that's how the court is funded, independently. It's already funded, it's already paid for, and if Grenada joins the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ, we are not required to pay 1 further cent. So I think that it is extremely important to know, to note that. because some people advance the proposition that we need to basically use the money to take care of our local court system. What we're really doing, we spend money, we borrow money, we spend it, we pay it back, and we're not utilizing the institution for which we have invested all these monies. So that's the funding of the court. The second aspect of independence relates to the appointment of judges. Are the judges appointed by the politicians of the region? Are the appointments of the judges, is the appointment of any judge on the CCJ influenced by a prime minister or leader of the opposition or any politician in the region? And the answer again is no. There is an independent structure. The Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission, RJLSC, which comprises 11 persons. It is chaired by the president of the CCJ, and the current president is Justice Adrian Saunders. And who are the other members of the JLSC? Listen carefully. See if you hear any politician named. 2 persons nominated jointly by the Organization of the Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. 1 chairman of the Judicial Services Commission of a contracting party selected in rotation in the English alphabetical order for a period of 3 years. So you always have either we have now the chairman of the JLSC of the Eastern Caribbean States who sits, that's Justice Pereira, Justice Janice Pereira, and then when you rotate, after 3 years, you'll have the Jamaica Chief Justice or the Trinidad Chief Justice, the Barbadian Chief Justice. They are all rotated, senior judicial officers. The chairman of a public service commission of a contracting party selected in rotation, in reverse. So you start from Z, come up. English alphabetical order for a period of 3 years. And I believe the sitting chairman of the Public Service Commission of Jamaica currently sits on the JLSC. We have 2 persons from civil society nominated jointly by the Secretary General of the community, that's the CARICOM, and the Director General of the OECS for a period of 3 years following consultations with regional non-governmental organizations. And you have 2 distinguished jurists nominated jointly by the Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of the West Indies, the Deans of the Faculties of Law of any of the contracting parties, and the Chairman of the Council of Legal Education. And the Council of Legal Education is that body responsible for law schools throughout the region. And we have a law school in Trinidad, Jamaica, Norman Manley, and Bahamas, the Eugene Depuche Law School. And then you have 2 persons nominated jointly by the bar or law associations of the contracting parties. Again, no political figure involved in the JLSC. And the responsibility of the JLSC is to appoint judges. There is a vacancy at the level of the CCJ. You meet the qualifications, you are interested in the job, you apply not to a prime minister, but to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. And they determine if you should be hired or not. And in doing so, they have no duty to consult with anyone. It is only when the president, a vacancy arises in the presidency of the CCJ, that the heads of government of the Caribbean community become involved. But even so, they cannot select a president arbitrarily. If a vacancy arises for the president, you apply to the JLSC. The JLSC will determine the persons qualified. And they may come up with a short list, or they may make a recommendation. And if they make a recommendation to the heads, and the heads do not agree with the recommendation, it has to go back with reasons to the JLSC, with good reason too, and the JLSC will always select the persons who are qualified. So the heads of government simply have to approve ultimately, not arbitrarily select, who becomes the president of the CCJ. And I just want to compare that system with the United States of America Supreme Court. We know over the last 3 years, you have heard it probably on CNN, Fox News. Maybe you're not conscious of it, but if you listen carefully, you would hear there is always the issue of contention in the United States as to the judges sitting on this U.S. Supreme Court, which is akin to our CCJ. It's the highest court in the United States. And just before the presidential elections, one of the judges, the senior judges, Justice Scalia, he passed away. Right? He passed away, and he was considered a conservative judge. When you speak, unlike speaking about the CCJ, when you speak of the judges on the United States Supreme Court, they are well categorized. As my good friend Jerry Edwin in the audience can tell you, they are liberals and conservatives. And just before the death of the last Supreme Court judge, the court was considered a conservative court. 5-4. 4 liberals and 5 conservatives. 1 conservative passed away within 2 years before the presidential elections. And the Republicans were saying President Obama ought not to nominate the next judge because elections are too close. Let's see who wins elections first. Leave it to nominate. And you know why it was important? Because with the death of that judge, the U.S. Supreme Court, 4 conservatives, 4 liberals. And you needed, if the Democrats came to power, then it was expected that the president would nominate a liberal and will tilt the court 5-4. 5 liberals, 4 conservatives. If a Republican became president, as he eventually became president, then he was expected to nominate a conservative judge. So you don't have any JLSC where you're sending your applications independently. Just listen to CNN and Fox, because there's a debate going on right now in relation to the Supreme Court, because one judge retired over the last 2 months. The president nominates and the Senate approves. That's how it takes place in the United States of America. So while we here in the Caribbean are criticizing and questioning the ability of our own court to be independent, we have 2 great institutions, the CCJ Trust Fund and the JLSC, that protects the interests of the Caribbean people to ensure that the court remains independent. Just let me quickly move on. I'm sure that my time is expired, but I was asked to speak on the professionalism of the court, and I just want to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because this court deals with real cases that affects real people. And some people say, what this CCJ thing is about is for them lawyers and them. It's for the judges and them. That is not we think. But listen to this. We have our own CCJ. And I want to just identify 5 cases that the CCJ has dealt with in the last 13 years that impacts significantly either on the Caribbean people, including each and every one of us inside here. Or, if you understand the judgments in these cases, then this issue about CCJ ruling for politicians, about ruling for their friends because they know their friends across the Caribbean and their fellow judges, just listen to these examples. 1, the Shanique Mary case out of Barbados. And may I indicate that when this case arose in 2013, our special guest speaker, Mia Mottley, was not Prime Minister of Barbados. Let me make that very clear. But in this case, and this is a case in the original jurisdiction, not the appellate jurisdiction, but it tells you how the CCJ approaches its cases. It's not about Barbados was the first to join, so therefore we should be committed to Barbados. Shanique Mary was an ordinary Jamaican citizen who never traveled in her entire life, about 22, 23 at the time. And she went to Barbados for a vacation. When she landed, she was subjected to certain treatment, including being strip searched and an internal intimate body search was done. She was denied entry and sent back to Jamaica the following day after overnighting in a cell. And as I always say, without even the benefit of a shower, was sent back to Jamaica. That's an ordinary citizen of Jamaica. And what did she do? As we all know, she sued the government, the state of Barbados, in the original jurisdiction of the court. And the court ruled for her and awarded compensation against Barbados. That is not a Shanique Mary case. That is not a case that benefits Shanique Mary alone. That is a case that benefits each and every single one of us in this hall who travels. Any one of us. Because it laid down the law as to what immigration officers and customs officers in the different countries ought to do. Because you have freedom of movement, and it can only be restricted in certain circumstances, and the CCJ laid down the law. That judgment is binding, not only on Jamaica, but every single Caribbean country that's a member of the Caribbean Court of Justice, including Grenada. And it's stated more particularly that you can't just deport a citizen just like that. You have to afford certain facilities, including phone calls, to contact family, to contact attorney, and it laid down the law. The Caribbean has never been the same in terms of immigration and customs officers, with a few exceptions, I must say, but since the Shanique Mary case. Secondly, the second case, and that deals with, again, I use this case for access, as AG and Chair mentioned. CCJ means ultimately access or greater access to justice. You know, there was a case out of Guyana in December 2017. Case is Blairmont Rice Investment, Inc. versus Cayman Shankar Company Limited. And it dealt with leave to appeal. It was a leave to appeal. But you know, that case was the first case in which the senior counsel who represented the appellant in that case was allowed to remain in his home through the technology. He argued the case from his house. He didn't have to even go to the High Court in Guyana. He stayed in his house and he argued the case. And the CCJ makes provision for persons who cannot afford relation to lawyers or cannot afford to come to Trinidad through the high technology which they use. And in this case, that was the first case, probably anywhere, in the Commonwealth, and certainly in the CCJ, where a senior counselor stayed from his living room or study, someplace in his house with a nice background, I suppose, to argue that case on behalf of his clients. The third case I'm going to refer to Dean Boyce and others versus the Judicial and Legal Services Commission of Belize. Again, they talk, them CCJ boys, they know their partners all throughout the country. The Caribbean is a small place. They're studying UE together. They know one another, and therefore they will protect their own. That's a strong line you hear about. The boys in England don't know us, so they don't care, and therefore they can be independent. This Dean Boyce case was one where a litigant complained in Belize that a certain judge lacked what he referred to as judicial acumen, and more importantly, he had all of these outstanding judgments, delays in writing judgments. He was not writing judgments, and therefore he lodged a complaint before the Judicial and Legal Services Commission to remove him. While that complaint was pending, the judge was promoted to the Court of Appeal. And the issue became, the JLSC says, these things you're complaining about were relevant only to this judge as a High Court judge, not as a judge of the Court of Appeal. So we're not hearing it because it's not relevant here in the Court of Appeal now. The applicants brought judicial review proceedings to the High Court. The High Court agreed. Justice Courtney Abel agreed and sent it to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission and said, these complaints are relevant, you must hear it. They appealed to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal of Belize reversed the decision of Justice Abel. And persistent as those guys were, they appealed to their final court, which is now the CCJ. And the CCJ reversed the Court of Appeal of Belize and said, these complaints are relevant. Delays in writing judgments when you sit in the High Court must be relevant to the Court of Appeal. We are not pronouncing on it, but they reversed the Court of Appeal, and that matter now, involving a senior sitting judge of the Court of Belize, is now before the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. Dean Boyce and others. And may I just, again, we had the AG of Guyana and Cedric Richardson that I just want to use. It's a recent case, but the importance of having a final Court of Appeal, especially to settle fundamental issues. And this is one where that deals with the 2-term limits for president in Guyana. And an applicant says, listen, this 2-term limits thing breaching my constitutional rights. If I want to elect a prime minister or president, I must be able to choose who I want. So the 2-term limits that were introduced in Guyana, he sought to have it declared unconstitutional. He went to the High Court and won. He went to the Court of Appeal and won. You know what that would have meant? If it stayed there would no longer be 2-term limits in Guyana. But then the AG of Guyana appealed to the CCJ, and the essence, because of time, the CCJ reversed both the High Court and Court of Appeal and said, no, the law is constitutional, and they explained why in their very detailed judgments. And I just use that case to show why it is so important to have the wisdom of a final Court of Appeal. And the final case that AG referred to, and I'll just refer to it from a different perspective. Our major complaint against the court system, if you do a survey among the people, and you speak to the man in the street, say justice takes too long. It takes too long. Why go into the court and have a case 10 years pending and spending a set of money? The CCJ is out to right that wrong, and it is the final court. In Eddie Vento's case, this is a case concerning whether a Commonwealth citizen can vote in the elections in Barbados. And I'm not too sure who he voted for eventually. But that case, this gentleman, elections were on May 24th. He filed an appeal to the CCJ after working hours, 5 p.m. on the Friday. That's when registries close. You can't do it in Grenada or anywhere else in the region. He filed it because they have electronic filing at 5 o'clock. It reached the judges through the registrar and their system the Friday night. Because of the urgency, the CCJ set the hearing date for Sunday. And that Sunday, by the way, was Mother's Day too. I could imagine the rows in the home when the husbands in the CCJ were going out to sit on a case Sunday, Mother's Day, at 12. At 12, the Solicitor General in Barbados asked for an adjournment. Say things moving too fast here. Say, okay, we stand it down 1 hour. 1 hour. By 2:15, that case was completed. The CCJ ruled and had a written judgment within 48 hours. I say no more.
One thing you could say about Ruggles is he's very thorough. Very thorough. You all right? You sure? All you sure? Okay. I find you all kind of looking kind of cold down there, you know. You had to warm up a little bit, you know. Now, I look over to my left and I see a Prime Minister of Grenada and a Prime Minister of Barbados. If they had another Prime Minister, I'd give all you a joke, but you know. Them jokes, you had to have 3. You can't have 1. It's supposed to be a Grenadian, a Barbadian, and a Trinidadian or something, so that's all. So, all right. If we find a Trinidadian before you think, I'll give all you a joke, okay? All you okay? You all sure you all okay? You all sounding cold down there. All right, okay. Fine. So you're sure you're good? Nice. We're going to now invite a young lady to the microphone. Her name is Miss Cherise Noel. She's a law student, and she is going to come and give us her take on why we should support the CCJ. Give her a round of applause as she comes.
Your Excellency Dame Cecile Lagrenade, Governor General of Grenada, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Mia Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, Ministers of Government, Senator the Honorable Chester Humphrey, President of the Senate of Grenada, Honorable Michael Pearce, Speaker of the House of Representatives, other parliamentarians, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Sir Lawrence Joseph and other members of the CCJ Advisory Committee, senior government officials, members of the Bar Association, members of the Social Partners Committee, specially invited guests, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Many, many years ago, sweet Grenada got its independence in 1974, And what an amazing feat it was to be 133 square miles and in charge of our destiny, or so we thought. Upon the grant of independence in 1974, we were not truly afforded the opportunity to fashion a society that was truly Grenadian in all aspects. Upon the grant of independence, we were still woven into the fabric of our colonial masters as we inherited a constitution written by them, and by virtue of Section 104 of same, we retained one of their highest courts of English jurisprudence as ours, the Privy Council. The court at the highest tier in the judicial ladder is in charge of interpreting and correcting errors of the law. Law ought to be a reflection of society. Given the malleability of the English language and the ever-changing nature of society, we are almost certain that we will need the courts of appeals to ensure uniformity in the application of the law and to keep the law relevant. It is therefore exceedingly important to have at the helm of our judiciary a court that understands the society it is to govern. As it stands presently, we have a court that is culturally and geographically removed from the Grenadian context and by extension the Caribbean context. So what we have emanating from the Privy Council are ideas informed by English norms and cultures. We have numerous examples of this within the region's history. Most notably, we can see the divergences in their view of the death penalty and ours here in the Caribbean. This calls to mind the Jamaican case of Pratt and Morgan, where the Privy Council looked with disdain on the death penalty and ruled that the length of time the accused were on death row constituted cruel and inhumane treatment. After which, the Jamaican society went on to change their laws on the death penalty to fit their beliefs, which were in stark contrast with the Privy Council's position. We can draw numerous examples going forward of the divergences with English thinking and those here in the Caribbean. These countries are more progressive states, and it is very dangerous to continue to have them inform the order of our society. As a young person in today's society, it is unfair to have at the helm of my judicial ladder a court in which I can draw no nexus with. We can think creatively to link previous generations with the Privy Council, but there just is no way you can draw a nexus between my generation and those going forward and this Privy Council. I was not around pre-independence when British influence was greatest, nor was I around directly after independence. Yet I am made to obey rulings from a court which knows and understands nothing about me and the direction that we young persons wish to take. From our stubbornness growing up, you can see that we are a generation bent on doing our own thing, and a part of that includes being able to chart our own Caribbean jurisprudence. The cultural and geographical differences aside, there are a plethora of reasons why Grenada should accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ. Firstly, whether we want to admit it or not, there is a certain degree of elitism surrounding justice in the Caribbean. Upper levels of justice are more easily available to the wealthy in society, and that should not be. The CCJ, as a moving itinerant court, provides a cheaper option to justice. Currently, to access the Privy Council, in addition to already exorbitant legal fees, the regular citizen has to think about the airfare costs and accommodations to access justice, all quoted in one of the strongest currencies in the world, the pound. Having the CCJ, our very own regional court of appeal, substantially lowers this cost, therefore making justice accessible to more persons. Secondly, as the hub of integration in the CARICOM region, it is remiss of every OECS state to not be party to the CCJ's appellate jurisdiction. The structure of the OECS Supreme Court shows the region that it is quite possible to share high courts and to have quality judgments emanate from same. It is time for us to deepen our commitment to the regional agenda and sign on to the CCJ. We are already being looked at as shining examples of regional cooperation, so our hesitation to sign on to the appellate jurisdiction is very telling and not in a positive way. Thirdly, after being independent as a region for a little over half a century, it will be impossible to undo the centuries of psychological damage our experience with colonialism and enslavement has on our thinking. We were forced to believe that what comes from the metropole is better than what we produce locally, a phenomenon dubbed plantation mentality. So as a society, we are unjustifiably hesitant to place the wheels of justice in the hands of our very own. Persons are wary of signing onto the CCJ because they do not trust the quality of judgments that may emanate from same. The vast majority of the region's lawyers are educated at the University of the West Indies and trained under the Council of Legal Education. As a proud UWI Pelican, I can authoritatively state that the legal education in the Caribbean is in great hands. At the UWI, I was taught by the best of the very best, renowned international lawyers and even authors of some of the textbooks I was made to study from. So we can see that we have the intellectual capacity to feed into the courts. Presently, the court is staffed by renowned jurists, even having been blessed to have a judge who sat on the International Criminal Court. So you can see the court is very capable and can be sustainably staffed. We have seen in the Eddie Ventos and the Chief Electoral Officer case out of Barbados, the court's commitment to ensuring justice is served. For the first time, we had a virtual sitting of the court on a Sunday to protect the rights of non-nationals in the state of Barbados, an outcome which could have never been swiftly addressed if we have to rely on the Privy Council. Though the jurisdiction of the court was different in this case, it stands to reason that as a final court of appeal, they will extend the same swift service. This incorporation of technology into the justice system shows the progressive nature of the court and further cements why it is we need to come over. It was extremely heartbreaking to see the outcome of the 2016 referendum, especially regarding the bill to have the CCJ as the final appellate court. The law has always since been the passion of a select few, so I can understand why the general masses would not take it upon themselves to be acquainted with all the nuances that come with a switch to the CCJ. I must commend the government for swiftly rebounding from such a defeat and reintroducing efforts to have the electorate vote to remove the Privy Council as the final court of appeal. I hope that this time around, greater effort is placed on public education so that Grenadians can have a greater appreciation for this monumental step as we seek to unravel the final thread that ties us to our colonial masters and as we seek to reaffirm our commitment to regionalism and the Caracas movement. In closing, when all systems of society fail, law is what we have to rely on. At the very least, we should ensure that the law we have to rely on truly belongs to us. The CCJ is the only way to go. Thank you.
Let's hear it for the young lady one at a time. They're doing a very good job there, over there in Barbados. You are, my dear? Barbados? Yes, she hasn't gone to Trinidad yet. If she had gone to Trinidad, you might have get a joke. Ladies and gentlemen, we recognize after you have been sitting there listening to all of these speeches, so to speak, that we have to, loosen you up a little bit. So we're going to be inviting the CC Birds Choir and Brother Scorpion. Well, he is going to come after the CC Birds Choir. We're going to be doing a cultural interlude. And if you paid attention to a certain poem that was read earlier, you might recognize some of the words. So without further ado, CCJ, the CC Birds.
Right here.
light us up, right? No, that's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Break from colonialism. This is what to do. Have a united Caribbean. This is best for you. Break the chains that bind us to the colonial past. We say Privy Council is the place to start. Listen what we say. Yes for the CCJ. Listen what we say. Vote yes for the CCJ. The Caribbean Court of Justice, it's we own Caribbean Court, giving us good service with decisions of note. Easy access to justice is what we must promote. CCJ deserves it, so get out there and vote. Listen what we say, vote yes for the CCJ. Listen what we say, vote yes for the CCJ. Let's have true independence in the Caribbean. It's time we call the shots and not depend on Britain. One united Caribbean is what we all must want. Let's break the bonds from Britain and rely on we own plan. Listen what we say, vote yes for the CCJ. Listen what we say, vote yes for the CCJ. You say you want justice for the common man, then rely on CCJ for solution. The Caribbean Court of Justice for the ties that bind. So get in your section and leave the past behind. Listen what we say, vote yes for the CCJ. Get in your section, say yes to the CCJ. Forget about Britain, vote yes for the CCJ. All you come, say yes to the CCJ. Say yes to the CCJ. Say yes to the CCJ. Ticket, ticket, ticket. All right. So give us a round of applause, now, man. Well, all is so attached, right? And so, ladies and gentlemen, we turn you over one time to our brother Scorpion. We're using him plenty here because he didn't come home for a long time. So as he reached, we have him working. So for the next few minutes, I turn you over to Brother Seeley, Scorpion.
It's a pleasure being here, ladies and gentlemen, tonight. I'd like to do something a little different. Of course, you all expect me to sing Calypso, right? That's what you expect me to sing, right? But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something that's from the islands, okay? And you all know this song, and I'd like you to sing along with me, okay? We're going to try. Mr. Tech, Micah, give me a little more volume on the microphone. Just a little more. Thank you so much. Let's go, ladies and gentlemen. You know this one. You know how I do this. I like to roam through the audience. Yes? Help me. This is my island. in the sun, where my people has toiled since time begun. Though we have sailed on many seas, the shores will always be like home to me. Sing with me now. Oh, islands in the sun, willed to me by my father's hand, and all my days I have singing praise of a forest, waters, and shining sand. As morning breaks to heaven high, I lift my heavy load way up to the sky. The sun comes down with a burning glow, mingle my sweat with the earth below. Sing me now. Oh, island in the sun, willed to me by my father's hand, and all my days I have singing praise of a forest, waters, and shining sand. Perfect. I don't wanna miss on the drum, calypso songs, and the Mardi Gras. Don't wanna miss my carnival, calypso songs, philosophical. Come on, everybody. Oh, island, I can't hear you. Louder. Waters and shining sun. Oh, I don't want to miss the days I can't get, for so I want to. Yeah, I want to tell you this. Don't want to miss the Mardi Gras, calypso songs, the festival. Don't wanna miss the sound of drums, calypso songs, philosophical. Everybody! Oh, island in the sun, come on! Willed to me by my father's hand. In all my days I have singing praise of a forest, waters, and shining sand. All my days I have singing praise of a forest, waters, and shining sun. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, listen now. Listen what I'd like for you to do. We're going to do a twist. I know earlier you heard this a lot, but now we're going to do it a different way. I'm going to do a song that was done by Bob Marley, but the chorus, instead of saying, let's get together and feel all right, we're going to sing, let's get together and work this out. Okay? Let's get together and work this out. CCJ, let's get together and work this out. Okay? You got me? All right, so let's go. Volume on the music, man. Volume on the music. Musica, musica, musica. Come on. Give me some music. More music. I want to hear the music. Give me music. One love, come on. One heart, everybody. Let's get together and work this out. CCJ. One love, hey. One heart. I give a thanks and praise to your Lord. I say and work it out. Come on, let's get together and work it out. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let them all pass out there. Dirty remarks. There is one question I really love to ask. The one, is there a place for the hopeless sinners who have hurt all mankind just to save his own? Believe me, come again. One love, everybody sing it. One heart, I say, let's get together and work it out. CCJ, one love, oh, one heart, one heart. I say give a thanks and praise to your Lord. Come on, let's work it out. Everyone, let's get together and work it out. Have no fear. Let's get together and fight them holy and Magidian one love. But when the man come, and there would be none to whom. Hey, a pity on those who chances go thinner. There are no hiding place from the Father of creation. Believe me, one love is all about the one and one heart. Everybody say, let's get together and work it out. CCJ, one love. Everybody sing it out. One heart. I want to sing. Let's get together and CCJ, give a thanks and praise to your Lord. Come on, let's. I love the way you song. Yes, you song nice. Hey, God, you know, hey, God. Yes. Have no fear. No, let's get together and fight them holy and Magidian one love. For when the man come, there would be none to whom one. A pity on those who chances grow thinner. There are no hiding place from the Father of creation. Everybody sing now. One love, come on. One heart. Let's get together and work it out. CCJ. One love. I say, I give a thanks and praise to your Lord. I say, and work it out. CCJ, let's get together and work it out. Come on, I give a thanks and praise to your Lord. I say, and work it out. Everybody say, let's get together and work it out. Oh Lord, I give a thanks and praise to your Lord. I say, and work it out. Thank you. Thank you! I wish I could sing another one, but I don't have another one. I think they got to go again. Yeah, do your thing.
Thank you very much, thank you very much. Let's hear it again for Scorpion. Ladies and gentlemen, just a quick note. Those of you needing washroom facilities, they are at the back. And if you need to be refreshed, there's someone on the outside who has some snacks and some drinks. So if you want to get something, however, there's no eating in here. You could bring your drink, but not the eats. So if you want to do that, you can do that. Well, your time passed. Because at this juncture, brothers and sisters, well, I mean, you know, if you feel like you want to miss the Prime Minister, I don't think you want to do that. So you're going to have to hold that thirst until, you know. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, all put your hands together and invite to the microphone the Prime Minister of Grenada, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell.
I never thought the day I would have Randall Robinson introducing me in a meeting. We're breaking a lot of records tonight, you know. If he gets fired tomorrow, Ruggles will be the lawyer to defend him. Brother Chairman, Your Excellency Dean Cecil Lagranado, Governor General, of course, the Honorable, my dear sister Mia Motley, our Prime Minister from Barbados, colleague ministers of government, and I noticed almost the entire cabinet, and even our senators are here with us this evening. President of the Senate, Senator Honorable Chester Humphrey, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Michael Perry, other parliamentarians, members of the diplomatic community, Sir Lawrence Joseph and members of the CCJ Advisory Committee, members of the Bar Association, permanent secretaries, and other distinguished senior public servants who are here with us, special invited guests, members of the media, sisters and brothers, all. In my view, sisters and brothers, there comes a time in a country when bold decisions become absolutely necessary. The growth and development of individuals and nations are often synonymous with bold decisions. And the time is now for us in this land of ours to make a bold decision. And therefore, tonight I take this opportunity to announce that on November 6, 2018, our country, our citizens, we call upon to make one such bold decision to vote in a national referendum for the Caribbean Court of Justice to replace the Privy Council as a final court of appeal for Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. This, sisters and brothers, will be indeed a bold decision, a decision that shapes the future of our country and of our region, a decision that signals our unwavering support and commitment to regional integration, a decision that places us on a trajectory to achieve even greater economic success. Replacing the Privy Council as Grenada's final court of appeal is beneficial for several reasons, and of course the chairman of the advisory committee and Brother Ruggles Ferguson articulated many of those before. Therefore, I implore our citizens, all our citizens at this crucial time, that in our country, that we have to move to the next phase of the evolution as an independent nation, where we accede to the CCJ as our final appellate court. Sisters and brothers, there is nothing political about the move to promote the CCJ. This is beyond partisan political interests. It transcends political boundaries, the future of our children and grandchildren. The composition of the advisory committee set up to spearhead this move towards the referendum bears testimony to that fact. Every serious organization and political organization are members of that committee. Therefore, the prospects we face of change, as we know, usually invokes some measures of uncertainty, and this one clearly for some people is. However, change also presents opportunities. In this instance, sisters and brothers, we are being presented with another opportunity to showcase regionalism at work. This is not simply about Grenada. This is about our region and doing what we can within our national borders to promote regional integration. Many regional institutions have been established over the years, and some stand today as symbols of the collective wisdom and capabilities of our Caribbean family. The Caribbean Court of Justice has the potential to be the next pillar of strength that symbolizes our commitment to regional integration. Our very own University of the West Indies has produced some of the legal luminaries that currently serve this noble institution, and one can only hope that this will continue to be the case in many years to come. Sisters and brothers, the night is not my night. I'm here just to signal on behalf of Grenada and the New National Party and all concerned support to ensure that we move at all levels in our society to ensure that November 6th will be a historic day for all peoples of Grenada, Carriacou, and P.T. Martinique. The center stage tonight will be taken by my dear sister, Mia Motley, the Prime Minister of Barbados. And it's fitting that I was asked to introduce her, because I think I showed her how to win all the seats in a general election. Randall, close your ears, don't listen to this one. Just to say a little about our sister, she's a Tony of Law, it was said, and Queen's Counsel by profession. So it's quite fitting that we have invited her today to be the featured speaker. In addition to a legal profession, Sister Mia has been an active person in political life of Barbados for almost 3 decades. Therefore, I take the greatest of pleasure to introduce the sister that I caused to win all the seats to address us on this most historic topic today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Your Excellency, Governor General of Grenada, members of the head table, members of cabinet, members of parliament, distinguished Grenadians all. Thank you for welcoming me home. As most of you know, if you follow the news out of Barbados, life has been very hectic since the 24th of May. And the new Barbados government, which I have the honor to lead, is about to reach its 100-day mark. And our mission-critical agenda has really not given me much time to catch up with anything outside of Barbados. But when your Prime Minister reached out on this topic to ask me to be here, I had to come. I could not possibly say no. First of all, Prime Minister Mitchell is a friend and colleague, and I have a moral duty to support a friend and colleague in a worthy and noble cause. Secondly, there are 2 areas where I myself may now have to lean heavily on his significant experience and expertise, and may I say spectacular success. He has already told you that he has taught me how to win all seats. He didn't tell you that he now needs to teach me how to win it 2 and 3 times. Although I confess now regionally that on the 3rd occasion it won't be me, because I believe in self-imposed term limits, 2 terms and I'm done. So I will leave him always as the preeminent victor as to how to do it 3 times, and I shall be satisfied with 2. But secondly, I've also come to learn how to manage the stabilization of an economy and its return to impressive growth. I believe yours was in the vicinity of 4% last year, through a homegrown, IMF-supported recovery program. The IMF comes to Barbados to start on Friday, but tomorrow on Friday. So that when I say I've come to learn, I mean that I've come to learn. In diplomatic language, I'm told they call it reciprocity, although somehow I feel that my demands on your advice in these matters, Keith, may be more onerous than the task that I willingly undertake this evening.
all levity aside, I'm here for a very simple reason. Having followed the tireless and determined efforts of a former cabinet colleague, Sir David Simmons, who was originally the first chair of the Preparatory Committee of the Caribbean Court of Justice, I assumed responsibility for that committee and therefore the establishment of the court in August 2001. It was a position that I held until the court's inauguration in April 2005. History will record that I was not able to be present at the inauguration only because the prison had burnt in Barbados, and the date of the inauguration was the date that the prisoners were being transferred from Glenderry. And as your Prime Minister would tell you, drunk or sober, mind your business. And it was my duty to deal with a national crisis rather than, as I would have otherwise liked, to participate in the celebration of the inauguration of the court. But my absence from it did not in any way reduce the critical importance which I have placed before and since then on the establishment of this preeminent regional institution. I've seen it from the inside, I've seen it from birth, I've seen it function thereafter, and I know its true value. And that is why I accepted this task this evening willingly. Our efforts, I believe, have been fully vindicated as a region. And I say so 13 years on, having been one of the key persons who had to move from Jamaica in the north to Trinidad and Guyana in the south, speaking to ordinary persons like yourselves about what we were dreaming to do and what we wanted to do. Tonight I have the pleasure of not speaking about a dream, but about reflecting on a reality. I can't pretend that I'm not deeply disappointed that there are only 4 Caribbean countries that have joined the appellate jurisdiction. Barbados and Guyana originally agreed from the beginning that it would subscribe to the appellate jurisdiction of the court. And may I say here, for the benefit, Mr. Chairman, and I do remember that day with Pat Bishop very fondly and wish that she was with us still today as one of the Caribbean's finest ever voices and musicians and artists. But may I say that one of the things that gave me great pride to be a Barbadian when we dealt with the Caribbean Court of Justice was that we spoke with one voice. There was no partisan politics at all with respect to the issue of the Caribbean Court of Justice. And I salute you therefore, sir, for being a part of this event, because there are matters, and part of the maturity of our region is to recognize that there are matters that go to the national condition and must go beyond partisan politics. As I said, it doesn't give me great pleasure that there are only 4 of us. And I pray that the decision of your country to go to referendum as required by your constitution and that of Antigua to do the same on that day will cause the 6th of November to be regarded as a significant date in the history of our Caribbean civilization. I somehow feel that many of you are already seized of the issues. And I feel that this is a case of the art of repetition as I speak to you tonight, but locating it from a different voice and a different space. Let me begin by thanking Chairman Sir Lawrence Joseph and your CCJ Advisory Committee of Grenada for this invitation. And as I indicated, the ability to be here is special. Many of you may not know that my grandmother was Grenadian, and therefore I take great pride in being able to play any role whatsoever in the development of Grenada. Your determination to break the chains of colonialism for one united Caribbean goes beyond the wonderful expression of song that we just had and into the reality of now making it the real and lived reality for every Grenadian. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves shall free our minds. We associate it with Bob Marley, but it was really the words of the great Jamaican, great Caribbean man, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who immortalized those words because he understood that it was a battle that goes beyond anything else. And in a very real sense, even though the laws of the land were not yet allowing for fairness and equality and non-discrimination when Marcus Mosiah Garvey spoke, he knew then that even if we remove the legal vestiges of discrimination, the greatest battle would be in the emancipation of our minds. Caribbean people, even now, 184 years after emancipation, must rid ourselves of the psyche that does not allow us to see ourselves as the best that we can possibly be. It is that struggle to shake off those lingering vestiges of the plantation and of colonial subservience, that constant search for identity, that nagging and debilitating self-doubt which subconsciously inhibits our ability to affirm and embrace true independence. That is what we are fundamentally fighting for. And it is, in my view, these complex emotions which often cloud our reason and our judgment on matters such as the Caribbean Court of Justice, and indeed in many other areas of our Caribbean community experience, where common sense tells us that there is merit and strength in collective action, but impulse and insecurity often pull us in a different direction. You know, I'm going to pause here and reflect on a book called The Racial Contract, I think it was, by a gentleman, a distinguished Caribbean citizen called Charles Mills. And it ought to be compulsory reading for every Caribbean citizen, because he reflected on the history of this region, that when settled, not discovered, in modern times, they told us that black people were not human. And when they could no longer sustain that argument, they told us that we were subhuman. And when they could no longer sustain that argument and had to recognize that you had to acknowledge that we were all human, they told us we were not good enough to govern ourselves, and hence you move from slavery to colonialism. And when they realized that they could no longer continue that argument in the middle of the last century, they then said to the rest of the world, we are all equal. But we became all equal, cementing differences so large that persons could not naturally benefit from being all equal. We have some serious discussions still in the region to have. And as we approach the second generation of independence, Grenada, you took your place just about what, 4 decades ago? 1974. We took ours 52 years ago. But we were so busy dealing with the basic necessities of bringing food to the table and shelter to our people, housing, basic education and health, that what the great Barbadian, who is no longer with us, Sir Roy Marshall, called actually around the same time as the CCJ was being inaugurated, that we forgot in the first generation of independence dealing with some of the higher order issues that constitute a nation and a society. Matters of justice, matters pertaining to identity. And very real sense, as we now move into this second generation of independence, that is what you in Grenada and we in Barbados have come to terms with now. And there are some difficult discussions, but as we all know, if you reach 44 and 52 and you can't have difficult discussions, something wrong in life. The fear for difficult discussions, leave that to people under 25. And even then, as we heard from our young friend, you are not frightened for the difficult discussions that confront us as a people. Two of the fundamental aspects of our governance have been completed. That political independence to which I just spoke, and indeed, as a result of that, it means that we control our parliament and we control our executive. But the third branch of government remains an issue for too many of our Caribbean brothers and sisters, of which Grenada is one. In our case, the other unresolved issue is the issue of our head of state. The first is one I will come to, the issue of the head of state. Tonight is not the time nor place to deviate on that path. If not, we might be here all night. And I might find cause to remind you of what a friend of Prime Minister Mitchell and myself, namely Prime Minister Simpson Miller, she dealt with it by saying, time come, but the time still hasn't come. But tonight I will stay focused on the other part of the mission. And I share that only with you to let you know that we too are along the road to that destination. With Grenada, Barbados, and other Caribbean colonies, when we negotiated our independence, we repatriated that legislative and executive arm, as I told you, from London to St. George's, from London to Bridgetown, London to other Caribbean capitals. It simply meant that our laws were no longer made by the Parliament at Westminster. And no longer did we have policy or cabinet decisions coming from Whitehall in England. You see your own cabinet ministers now and you relate to them as they determine your future based on your aspirations and your realities as a people and as a nation. Why we didn't do it with the judicial arm? Long story. When you hear talk of cases, taking cases to the Privy Council, it's almost like that dream for only a few. Because we already know that 95% of the people in my country couldn't go, and 95% of the people in your country can't go. 95% of the people in our country could not afford to go to London and stay in a hotel and pay a lawyer and find the money for how many ever days the case take and come back. It was a privilege that belonged to a few. That this still exists today causes and should cause many of our people to ask, is this really what independence means for us? And this cannot be an academic argument. This is about real people and real problems and real issues. Families fighting over a border in the land. You don't solve it, what happens? Who takes the law into their own hand? Justice has to be accessible, affordable, and swift. The track record that we've had in the region, because of our concentration, as I said, in the first generation of independence, has left much to be desired. And I speak not of here, I speak of my own country as well. That we have now had to make decisions about how we can expedite access to justice, because we believe that that is one of the most basic rights that a citizen can have. And without that, the state fails the citizen. We feel that it is critical to confront some of these issues, because there's a fear within some of our legal fraternities, as you heard earlier, that the court would be subject to political interference and would not be capable of acting impartially. I want to assure you that the scrupulous nature that has been taken to insulate the matter of the appointment of judges and the financing of the court from political influence has more than nullified this concern. And that's what I mean when I say that I am so happy tonight to be speaking from the perspective of what our reality has been than when I had to speak 14 and 15 years ago to persuade people that this was a dream and could be possible. What is the bottom line? That when we went to Georgetown, and perhaps let me go back, I inherited the preparatory committee at a stage where we asked the heads of government for $60 million to establish a court. And the first meeting was the intercessional, I believe, in Belize in February of 2002. The heads ran me out of the room. Where are they going to get $60 million from? But because we were adamant that we needed to do this, we went back and we consulted the bar associations and different other groups of people in the Caribbean Development Bank, etc. And we came up with the concept of the trust fund that would insulate the court from the decisions on an annual basis of ministers of finance who might feel, well, I don't like the decision and I'm not giving you the money. None of that. It was to be a court that had its own money. No money, no honey. Ordinary people understand the need for vex money. You're not going out without your money. And effectively, that's what we did. We gave the court its vex money. We created that ability for the court to be able to say, we don't need to rely on any government in the region for our day-to-day operations. And why? Because once you establish the trust, we put it at a volume, at an amount, that it could live off of the interest. Just like how you have money in the bank, if you have money in the bank, you're living off of the interest, or you're using the interest for something that you want to do. That's what we did with the court. And I'm breaking it down because it's necessary for every ordinary citizen of this country to understand that none of them will have to depend on Prime Minister Mitchell's cabinet for a single cent. But it gets better. Because by the time we agreed to that as well, we made one fundamental decision as a region. And in fairness, it benefited those countries like Barbados and Guyana, who went in for both the original and the appellate jurisdiction at once. And that was because we didn't want to have the court coming back to deal with governments and ministries of finance in a to and fro, Prime Minister Patterson, to his credit, as he then was, sat with me, and we agreed in Georgetown that the amount required for the contribution to the fund was indivisible. That it mattered not whether you were coming in on the appellate and original, or if you were only coming in on the original. And we felt that we needed to do it that way because of the fear that so many had, without justification, I might add, but that the fear that so many had that that interference could come if the court was forced to deal on a regular basis with the executive of the different governments, the executive of different countries in the region. So that Grenada has effectively been paying for a court since 2005. But you haven't been using it. And it will not cost you a single red cent more to exercise the right now to have the Caribbean Court of Justice as your final court of appeal. And we did this because there were so many mistaken assumptions and apprehensions that could have swayed public opinion against the court. Our reality has turned out to be quite different. We accept, lest someone say that there will never have to be a replenishment of the trust fund, that at some point in the court's life, there will be replenishments. But those replenishments of the trust fund are so few and so far between that a generation might go without there having to be a replenishment. And the replenishment comes as a result of major capital changes, not just in the normal functioning of the recurring expenditure of the court. And luckily, from 2018, the reality has turned out to be quite different from the fears and apprehensions expressed by so many. The positive reputation that the Caribbean Court of Justice has gained in recent months and years has enhanced its favorable rating in the eyes of ordinary lawyers and in the eyes of ordinary CARICOM citizens. I therefore commend the government of Grenada and the people of Grenada and the opposition of Grenada for placing this courageous decision back before the people of Grenada at this time and for mounting this comprehensive public education program. People must understand fundamentally that the court is simply the best way that you can resolve decisions in your life. Not even the country's life, but your life. Because freedom is choice. And if you don't have choice, you don't have freedom. And if you can't afford it and you can't access it, you don't have choice. And I can't break it down any simpler than that. I want to give you a little history and context of the court for those particularly like the law students who are already seized with many of the issues, but just to bring it into context such that you understand that this is no fly-by-night operation, no hurried come up thing. Many would be surprised to know that as far back as 1901, a Jamaica Gleaner editorial first suggested the break with the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. 117 years ago in Jamaica, there were those who understood that there needed to be a break with the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, and that we needed an institution that understood Caribbean people and Caribbean language and Caribbean mores and Caribbean values. It took us exactly 100 years in February 2001, on the 14th, for that agreement to be signed. Valentine's Day. So to say that the debate was a swift one or a hurried one is to ignore the reality of the many conversations and articles and debates moving from the north in the Caribbean Sea right down to the Latin American continent with Guyana. Indeed, there were also calls in 1947 at the colonial governors meeting, in 1970 at heads of government meeting in the region, in 1975, Dr. Alexis, I believe, you published a paper. 1988, heads of government meeting in Antigua, a firm decision was taken. And that's ironic that Antigua is going for its referendum on the same day as you. But a firm decision was taken in Antigua in 1988 at the heads of government meeting to finally establish the regional court, whatever that court was to be, to replace the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. And of course, the 1992 West Indian Commission's Time for Action report also added its voice in support for this court to become a reality in 2001. The court, once established, however, had both original and appellate jurisdiction. And what do we mean in layman's terms about original jurisdiction? In this country, at Grand Anse, the heads of government of the Caribbean region gathered in 1989 and recognized that individual countries could not plan out their economic development and provide for their citizens on their own, and that it was critical that we establish the Caribbean countries who were willing as one single market. No different from if you were in one country, one landmass, one sovereign state. And that we would become a community of sovereign states. And that we would equally work towards the creation of a single economy. Well, you can't have a single market, and you can't have a single economy without sometimes people falling out and having disputes. And how you view what is to be done may be different from how somebody else views what is to be done, and somebody has to decide. In a country, it is easy, because we all know that these are the national courts. But in a region of sovereign states, there is no court to resolve disputes. And when we therefore say that this is a Caribbean Court of Justice in an original jurisdiction, the jurisdiction is original to the fact of the single market and single economy. So when you heard just now the reference to the Shanique Myrie case, that was effectively because under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, which came out of the Grand Anse Declaration in 1989, and that's why Grenada is so key to this discussion. Because there would be no revised Treaty of Chaguaramas if the decisions were not taken at Grand Anse. And coming out of that, we had then to find a mechanism for resolving disputes like Ms. Myrie's. You come to a country, you're told you have freedom of movement, but you're treated in a certain way. The court comes out and says, yes, you have freedom of movement. These are the only conditions that it should be constrained for public health, for security, or if you don't have enough money to sustain yourself. So everybody now in the region knows. We have the issue with the common external tariff and the duties that we charge. In the case of Arawak and Trinidad Cement Limited, Jamaica. So that original jurisdiction is critical because you have rights that if somebody doesn't protect them properly, you need to be able to go and have them protected. The appellate jurisdiction, that's straightforward. You file a case in the High Court rule against you, you're going to the Court of Appeal rule against you, you say, boy, I'm taking my chance, I'm going upstairs. And you go to the final Court of Appeal. And that's all it means by original and appellate. Everybody with me? We're good? Right. Because nobody is to confuse your head. And when done, you are already paying now. You're using the original, or could use it. You're paying for the original, you're paying for the appellate, but you're only using the original. So, when we say to you then that this is a time, this is an idea whose time has come, you begin to better understand why this is a natural extension to give you the freedom that you need to have as a citizen of this country and as a citizen of the Caribbean. There are other countries in the region that require referenda too. Indeed, I believe Jamaica requires one. Antigua that we just spoke about requires one. And there's some that don't. In Barbados, we didn't require one. But as I said, luckily, we had unanimity between the government and the opposition, and a simple act of parliament allowed us then to reclaim our patrimony and to return to Barbadians the right to have this court as a final court of appeal. In your case, I am told that you require a 2/3 majority by popular referendum, and that you are going again for it. The question is, how do you get people to show up and vote for something that seems so dry and so remote? Well, the chairman has to continue talking on the platform. Because he's not dry nor remote. But he's also providing the symbolism that is so critical to the ordinary man and the woman. Grenada must take this on as a single nation. Two, we need to then start examining the benefits. And others on this platform have done a wonderful job tonight. I simply will add a few facts. Barbados now sends, according to the president of the court, distinguished son of the OECS, Mr. Saunders, Justice Saunders. Barbados now sends to the Caribbean Court of Justice 7 times more the cases that went to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. 7 times more. And that's what I mean when I say freedom is about choice. That people have the ability to go now and to make decisions because it's affordable. It's accessible. You've heard that the court can come to Grenada once you sign on. You've heard that even if it can't come to Grenada on the particular day, you heard what happened on the eve of our election when Commonwealth citizens felt that their rights were being aggrieved. And within days, and on a Sunday, had a matter heard before the court. In our case, the court has also delivered, as I said, apart from the Shanique Myrie case, other distinction decisions that have made a difference to ordinary Bajans' lives. The court has said that the length of time on remand must be considered. That matters to ordinary people whose children may be legitimately or not so legitimately taken up and held on remand in our countries. The question of the case out of Belize, Marin and the Attorney General of Belize spoke to the issue of the tort of misfeasance in public office. In other words, when you do have officers who hold the executive who behave badly and inappropriately and corruptly or abuse power, the Caribbean Court of Justice says, no, not about here. No, can't happen. And we must now hold our public officials to a different standard. So that when those persons want to tell you who are against the court, that the court is a creature of politicians, it is clearly not a view that sits well with the decision and judgment of the court in Marin and the Attorney General. For they have set new standards for behavior in public office in the Caribbean. Similarly, we have seen the very first decision, I must tell you, of the court was against Barbados. And who were the first two countries signing up? Barbados and Guyana. And it was a case called Boyce and Joseph and capital punishment. And the court ruled against the government of Barbados. And its very, 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 very first decision. And its two chairs of the preparatory committee were Sir David Simmons, who at that time then became Chief Justice of Barbados, and myself, who was Attorney General of Barbados. So I don't know of any clearer indication of a court expressing its utter and absolute independence than the manner in which we have given you decision after decision. There have been cases we've won as governments too, but if I gave you those, then you say, you see what I tell you? So I gave the ones that we lose, but you already know that we don't associate with defeat very often. The court is also producing high caliber judges and judgments of a quality that are equal to any in the Commonwealth. The same Boyce and Joseph, and I don't want to get into deep things, but delivered themselves of a judgment. The judgment was delivered that spoke to a level of judicial activism with respect to imposing on the governments a recognition that our Constitution created rights even when it was purporting only to declare, to have them as declaratory rights. And that in truth and in fact, some of these things that were otherwise considered as declaratory rights are in fact justiciable. Now, I can only tell you, and lawyers would understand what I mean, that this court breaks new ground with respect to the jurisprudence of the Commonwealth, not just of the Caribbean. And indeed, the first president of the CCJ, distinguished jurist, President Michael de la Bastide, said, and I quote him, "It is very important that the judges who make the decisions which create our jurisprudence have a close and intimate connection with our societies." I'll deviate for a second. When I did my law degree, finished the bar, I did 6 months pupillage in London. And if ever I doubted the need for a Caribbean Court of Justice, those 6 months removed that doubt from my head completely. I went in to the very first case I ever sat down in London to see a young lady from Jamaica charged with a serious crime, had a very bright career ahead of her, international career. Her boyfriend gave her, it would seem, 6 tins of ackee to carry up for somebody in London. The tins look like you buy them in the supermarket. Labels on, tin, seal, everything. Not even bounce. And clearly, somebody set her up. Because when customs pulled her out at Heathrow, it was compressed marijuana in the 6 tins. She'd only been going out with a fella a couple of months. Whether it was him or somebody else, we will never know. But it pained me to sit there in that court and watch the evidence be delivered before her, against her. And when she said, when the time came, and she started using words that I was liming with my friends, and everybody in the court looking around, they don't know what the word lime mean. They didn't know what the word line meant. They didn't understand the nuance of words. Just now I referred to Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller's comment on a head of state when she said, time come. Language is the most powerful thing that we have as human beings. And we evolve in our own communities ways of communicating that others who are not of us may not fully appreciate. So that when President de la Bastide delivered himself of those words, that the jurisprudence created by the Caribbean Court of Justice reflects that of persons who have a close and intimate connection with our society. Nothing is truer. And that example of that young lady, and in the end, the prosecutor was so moved after the jury convicted her that it was one of the few instances where the prosecutor in the Court of Appeal in England delivered himself that I was aware of a clear statement that he too was shocked and surprised at the verdict of the jury, because they did find her guilty and sentenced her. The judge sentenced her. She eventually was dismissed and released on appeal. I've also spoken to the fact that it is almost an affront for us to believe that you and I can be the best in the world. I don't know about anybody else, but anybody can be as good as, not better. And that is how every one of our children must be raised in this Caribbean region. We have produced more Nobel laureates pound for pound, inch for inch than anywhere else in the world. Study it. We have global excellence in the form of not just Bob Marley and Peter Tosh and all your own, the Mighty Sparrow, Slinger Francisco, my own, Rihanna. We have global icons of excellence. What makes us believe that they are limited to music and economics and writing, like with Derek Walcott and V.S. Naipaul? Is it because the law is dry? Is it because the law is unsexy? We've had distinguished jurists sit on the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. Telford Georges, Eddie Zaka, and I can go on. Ronnie Douglas, who is former Chief Justice of Barbados. I can go on. And pound for pound, they are as good or better, have been as good or better than anyone else. But we have to believe that appealing to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council as a result is an affront to our sovereignty and inconsistent with the independence which we have otherwise claimed. I've already told you about the unique structure of the court, and I believe Ruggles earlier spoke about the appointment of the judges. And let me take a minute here on this. No Prime Minister or President in the Caribbean has any say whatsoever in the appointment of a judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The Regional Judicial Legal Services Commission, to which Ruggles referred earlier, makes the decisions after persons apply. And we are so impressed with that even though we have only been in government for just over 3 months, the Attorney General in Barbados and myself had a conversation last Friday as I reflected on where we are and how we move forward to transform our societies, to indicate that we believe that the appointment of judges should not be the preserve of a prime minister, but that we should invite judges in our own domestic appellate and high court system to apply. And we are going to proceed with that kind of conversation with our own judges, because we believe it is the right thing to do to evolve our societies to a higher level of independence. But the CCJ has been doing it for 13 years. And therefore, you can have the comfort as Grenadians that this will not be as a result of who somebody like politically, but it is going to be as a result of whether a person has both the judicial content to be applied, the judicial bearing, because that matters too, I'm told, and the even-handedness and even-tempered nature to dispense justice without fear or without favor. Similarly, you can be confident that your grandchild or your child can grow up and aspire to be a president of this court or to be a judge of this court. With respect to the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, you have already given this court 2 of its 3 presidents. I want to repeat myself. We have been fortunate to have 3 very distinguished presidents in the Caribbean Court of Justice. The first, President Michael de la Bastide, came from Trinidad and Tobago. The second, Dennis Byron from St. Kitts. And the third, the current president from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So that you can be confident that if your grandchild or child is highly qualified, that they can aspire and rise to be the highest serving judicial officer in the region in a way that you could not expect if they were to continue to have to go to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. My friends, I've spoken much longer than I've intended to. But I feel that it was important to blend both the policy with the reality. Because you have to make decisions. And you have to get people out of their house, and you have to get people to go and make the decision on something that seems esoteric. And it is up to each and every one of you in this room to let them know that it is not esoteric. That it is about their life. It's about husband and wife. It's about common law, man and woman. It is about boundary disputes. It is about people who get locked up. It is about somebody who the police take up and say that they were doing something when everybody else around them said they weren't doing it. It is about everything that happens in our day-to-day lives. And you must have the confidence that when you say what you have to say, when you speak as a Grenadian, that the judge that you're speaking to understands everything that you say. That they don't have to ask for an interpretation. And that you do that in an atmosphere of fairness, and that the people who are doing it for you are people who not only understand you, but are rooted in the law and rooted in fairness. If Grenadians want a court that is beyond the reach of politics, then I say to you, you can have that in the Caribbean Court of Justice. So my friends, I hope that I have managed in some small way to contribute to this debate and to this conversation, and to demystify the Caribbean Court of Justice, because above all else, that is what we're trying to do. People hear court and they get frightened. People hear court and they back off. It's nothing other than an entity to allow you to have fairness in a decision to be resolved, and that is accessible to you if you can't reach it, if you can't afford it, if you can't go to it, it means nothing. How many in this room, how many in this country could go to the Privy Council tomorrow and get justice? And if you can't get it, then it's no good for you. Similarly, I want to tell you that this appreciation for this unique Caribbean institution, whose efficiency and effectiveness in the last 13 years has been stellar. It truly has been. And it gives me pride that those years of my life that I spent moving up and down the Caribbean, helping to make it a reality, were years well spent and time well spent. I am proud to call myself a Caribbean citizen and to have the Caribbean Court of Justice responsible for our fate with respect to its interpretation of the law and its resolution of disputes. I go further. I have been on record for many speeches, including the last heads of government meeting at Montego Bay, to say to the region that the example of a single strong institution employing the best that this region has to offer, but vesting it with national jurisdiction in the appellate court and regional jurisdiction as a treaty interpretation court, presents the example that we need to follow in so many more of our regional institutions and national institutions, rather than each country trying to find money that it does not have to duplicate what the other country doing over and over and over and over and over. And what do I mean? Why should the Eastern Caribbean states go for a financial services commission? We have one in Barbados. Let us vest it with national and regional jurisdiction. Similarly, why should Barbados create a civil aviation authority when the Eastern Caribbean has one that we can subscribe to and have do our own affairs in Barbados? Next Tuesday and Wednesday, there's a Council of Finance Ministers meeting in Barbados. And on Wednesday, the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee for the Single Market and Single Economy. And I pray that instead of my speaking to these issues on a platform, that we can now formally put some of these things on the agenda, such that we can save money within our domestic territories and apply those funds that we are using to replicate every institution in other areas of our governance that remain unresolved and remain a major challenge for our countries to afford. The Caribbean Court of Justice presents us with that perfect example, one that can be followed with the Regional Competition Commission in Suriname, that can become the Fair Trading Commission of all of our countries, attracting the best that the region has to offer, paying them properly, and allowing them to be proper practices of their profession in a way that the CCJ has done. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. You, the people of Grenada, now have that perfect opportunity to live the true spirit of independence by how you exercise your vote on the 6th of November. You can choose for yourselves that final court that closes that circle with the three arms of government. You have your parliament. You have your executive. You need now to settle the arrangements for your judiciary. And as you do so, remember always that history often conspires to send us signals. And those signals, if read and interpreted correctly, will point us in the right direction. It sent you one by sending me here as a Grenadian Barbadian to speak to you. It sent you one by reminding you of the fact that the Grand Aunts Declaration is the fount of where it all started with the original jurisdiction of this court. It sent you on by letting you know that the agreement to establish it and that actually gave it birth started on the 14th of February, a day otherwise known as Valentine's Day. Nothing that starts in love can end badly. But the final symbol is that my name is Mia Amor, so that I come with the name of love to bring you love for a court born in love. And I say simply to you that if I could sing, which I cannot, but I know that the chairman can, I would now raise the song of that great Caribbean artist, Jimmy Cliff, to remind you that you can get it if you really want. But you must try and try. You'll succeed at last. God bless.
Thank you, Madam Prime Minister. Well, look at that. You just clear out the place because nobody have no questions to ask. No, I think the whole thing just done. You know, as a GBSS boy, the last stanza of our school song came to mind. A truly great West Indies be this our constant aim, surmounting insular boundaries, a people in more than name. These words were written in 1923 by schoolboys. They lived in a time when people thought of Caribbean unity. We have suddenly become, certainly within the last few years, very insular, probably to the chagrin of our forebears, who always thought of a great West Indies. We have an opportunity now, brothers and sisters, to take a chance on us. Take a chance on us. And so, the CCJ might well be a place to start. Prime Minister, I also remembered Pat Bishop as she said, until all have crossed, none have crossed, and some we have to carry. So we have some decisions to make. Hopefully we will make the right one. This is where we open the floor to those of you who would like to ask questions of the panel. But before we do so, and Brother Citizen Rollo, I see your hand, so you'll come to the microphone first. But I want to, at this juncture, invite to join us at the head table Dr. Francis Alexis. So, Dr. Alexis, if you would join us. So we, as Dr. Alexis comes, we recognize Citizen Rollo. And there are two microphones in the aisles towards the front. Citizen Rollo is sitting close to the first one on the left. There's another one on this aisle. And if you want to make a contribution or ask a question, I would advise that you approach the microphone so that we can see you. I see Mr. Jude Bernard coming. I see also Mr. Maitland. I see a lady whom I don't know her name, but you'll let us know. But all right, so I have four people. I see a gentleman that I know only by a nickname, but Yes. So Greenface will follow the other. So in this order, Citizen Rollo, followed by Mr. Jude Bernard, followed by Brother Maitland, followed by the young lady to our left, and then Brother Greenface. And then I see Mr. Jerry Edwin. Okay, so shall we begin? Citizen Rollo.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, citizens all, but additional, should I say, subjects all, because I only learned recently that we are all subjects of the Queen. Greetings to the Barbadian Prime Minister, and accepting the established protocol, I make the following comment. Before I ask a very powerful question. During your exposition, Ms. Motley, you made reference on various occasions to sovereignty and independence. And I want us to pay attention to these two words. I want to begin by saying to, or should I say prior to asking the question, that I want to have it established that I'm not against the CCJ because I believe the Caribbean sufficiently bright. I think we way back on having made a decision to have established our own Caribbean jurisprudence. We have wasted time. But I also believe that we could have done it prior had this Caribbean been politically independent. Because we are not independent, particularly the small countries, the smaller countries like Grenada, because we are ruled by imperial orders in council of the Queen's highest majesty, because we are ruled by constitutions that are not enacted into the parliament of the country, nor have been accepted by the population through popular referendum, we have a situation where there is confusion relative to our independence. I refer to political independence. To cut it short, I ask you, particularly, Ms. Motley, you're a lawyer and you ought to know. Can you tell me, or this gathering, how a country which is ruled by an imperial order with a constitution that was never enacted in parliament, whose people are subjected to be subjects of a monarchy, can at the same time be politically independent and sovereign nation state? This is my question. I hope you can answer that. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, William.
Thank you. We will pause for the answer, and yes.
I really don't know that I can answer with respect to Grenada. What I can tell you is that the political independence and the sovereignty of the people versus the sovereignty of the parliament remains a very high academic debate that many people will carry on. But the truth is that there is nobody in this region who can doubt our independence with respect to our ability to take decisions of our own, that we have a constitution. You may not like the manner in which it started. Some feel that it should have been that our independence should have been an act of our own parliament as opposed to an act of the British executive. It's a legitimate debate, but the reality is that however, the Caribbean countries are independent in their executive and in their parliaments. We need to complete it now with the judiciary. So I will leave it at that for now, but I do know that there are some people who feel that, for example, we should have had the Declaration of Independence by our own Parliament. If I could turn back the hands of time, I wouldn't only do that, I would do a lot of other things. But it is not ours to turn back the hands of time.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Mr. Jude Bernard, he has given way to Mr. Maitland.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Mitchell, Honorable Prime Minister Mia Motley, Governor General, Honorable Ministers, audience. I would like to start by saying that as a citizen of Grenada, I will really appreciate the fact that our people will be honored, right, as to their rights to access justice. But unfortunately, this evening, the presentations did not meet all of my expectations. It brings back the memory of my first vehicle, right? When I purchased my first vehicle at the age of 19, the owner of the vehicle did not inform me of the broken windshield wipers, nor the ball joints, and I guess you all get the point, right? Now, I believe that in order for our people to make an informed decision, right, they should be aware, or at least the panel should present the pros and cons of the CCJ. I am also of the opinion that a representative from the Privy Council should have been here as well, right? Now, I am even more troubled because it seems as though the entire government is for the CCJ. Now, given the current state of Grenada's conflicts and corruption, I believe that my concern is well warranted. To Mr. Ferguson has mentioned 5 cases, right? You have continued mentioning 5 cases that have been viewed for the past 15 years at the CCJ. That is all well and good. I'm glad to hear of those cases. But are the judges that dealt with those cases, are they the same persons that are present now? Or are the new persons that are there now, are they of the same character? That is my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, the cases that I referred to, all 5 cases, I just referred to 5, but there are scores of cases. Those were cases between 2013 and as late as July 2018. In fact, 3 of them that I referred to were judgments between June and July 2018. The panel is still quite intact.
Perhaps I can also just said something which I didn't address in my speech. The President of the new Supreme Court of Britain, Lord Phillips, has already commented that much of the time of his judges is taken up with the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. Now, the British have perfected the art of diplomacy and the understatement. And we talked earlier about the power of language. And there can be no clearer message that they too feel that the time has come for us to get our business together and our act together. We are in danger and at risk of being the victim of reformed institutions if we are not careful. And I put it no higher nor no lower than that. If we know what we are about, we ought to take control of our future rather than allowing ourselves to become a victim of somebody else's decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Jude Bernard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If you'll allow me, I stand by the protocol already established. I'd like to make two very brief contributions to the discussion this evening. The first one, I would like to describe it as a matter of context, and the second one, a matter of morality. First of all, I'd like to say that in principle, I don't have any problem with the Privy Council. Sorry, with the CCJ. And as a matter of fact, the CCJ doesn't even have to be perfect for me to like it. It's ours.
Exactly.
However, the whole matter of context. You know, I have always said that the main difference between a rational and normal person and someone who is insane is their appreciation of context. Somebody who is rational understands context. Somebody who is insane doesn't. To the insane person, it is still carnival in Grenada. Being in a church is not different from being in a mass band. He doesn't understand context. And I'm saying that to say that in a country where, and you've mentioned it, speakers have mentioned it, where we've had 3 cases, 2 of them consecutively, where less than 18 percentage points separated the 2 leading parties, yet one party got 15 seats and the other one got none. 3 times. Twice consecutively, and it's even a boost. That is the context in terms of the governance of our country. This is also bolstered by the fact that the Senate is automatically gives an advantage or a majority to that same party. I'm talking about a context where, as was mentioned, and that's the height of hypocrisy, where the head of state is actually the representative of Her Majesty, talking about the vestiges of colonialism. And that head of state is actually an operative of the ruling party, because they change whenever parties changed. And as a matter of fact, we've had a case where I think we had 4 or 5 of them being paid at the same time. That's the context in which we operate. And I am worried for us to be operating in such a context, and for someone to say to me, the most pressing constitutional need of our country today is replacing the Privy Council with the CCJ. Somebody has to not be rational, collective, and bordering on insanity. That's why I talk about context. Secondly, on the matter of morality. The requirement of the Constitution is such that, unlike other countries, in some jurisdictions, we don't need a referendum. But in our case, the fact that a referendum is needed makes it very clear that the Constitution took away that responsibility from the executive and also from the Parliament So the people can decide. The people, not the parliament or the executive. In this case, so that asks us, it begs the question, now, what should be the role of the state in preparing the people for the referendum? Is it moral? Is it proper for the state to use taxpayers' resources to promote? I'm saying, no, not educate, promote a yes vote. I'm not saying the state doesn't have a role, but what should be its role? Should it be one where a prime minister or a leader says, I'm not loose this time, I'm going to promote it, and we're going to ask for a yes vote? Now, this is what I call the question of morality. What should be the terms of reference of that committee? Should it be that they go about and they write songs and prepare banners and posters and say, vote for the CCJ? Or should it be a case where we educate the people and let them make an informed decision to have the CCJ or remain with the Privy Council? And these are the things that bother me. They bother me a lot. And to me, the whole morality, I believe, honestly, that that committee should be reconstituted, should be given a proper terms of reference, so that they will, and they should be independently going about educating the people so that they can make the decision which the Constitution gives them, and not the executive or the parliament trying to use the resources of the state to tell them what to do and use up the power of the people. That's my contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Chair,
much.
I would like to respond to 3 points. One, Mr. Maitland, what are the cons against going into the CCJ? Or for that matter, leaving the Privy Council? The government of any Caribbean country does not have to put up any money for us to be in the Privy Council at all. So from a governmental point of view, being in the CCJ has a public cost, which does not obtain in relation to the Privy Council. But that point is cut back by the fact that Grenada has already put in the money to be in the CCJ, as the Prime Minister of Barbados explained. So what initially might be a con, it is indeed a con, a different kind of con, because it has no merit in it at all. I have been, over the years, trying to find an argument against going into the CCJ, and I have to admit I can't find one. I'm not saying that there is none. I just can't find one. Now, the question of context, which Mr. Bernard referred to. What is the proper context? The proper context is that there was a referendum in 2016. There were 7 bills. And the bill in relation to which most people showed an interest was the CCJ bill. I'm not saying more people voted for that bill than for another bill. But when you add the yes vote to the no vote, more people exercise their mind about the CCJ bill than about any other bill. Therefore, the people of this country indicated to us clearly that that is the bill about which they want to have another conversation. And this conversation is taking place, and that is the proper context. Morality. What does the Constitution say about this? The Constitution says that the Parliament has an obligation to pass laws for peace, order, and good government. When you can't talk about peace and order and good government, if, as the Prime Minister of Barbados told you, the third arm of the state, the judiciary, is practically removed from the ordinary people, that is contrary to order and to good government. A man coming down from St. David's, he reaches the Calavini, his car runs off the road. He's going to work. He loses an arm. He says to the NIS, I was in the course of the employment and therefore I should be given a higher level of benefit than what you're giving to me. That's not a concern for him alone, it's a concern for everybody, including the NIS. He goes to the High Court rules against him. He went up to the Court of Appeal ruled against him. He set out to go to the Privy Council. He put out 20,000 pounds. I'm not talking about decades ago. Last year I'm talking about. Lawyers in London charged him 35,000 pounds at the time. He put up 20,000 pounds. And then they said to him, you have to pay us some more money. He said, I just can't find the money. Refund me my money, my 20,000 pounds. They said to him, sorry, old chap. We've already used up 12,000 of those pounds. The most you could get is 8. Does that make for morality and peace and order and good government? And you come talking about context and morality. The state has an obligation to protect its citizens and to make justice available to them.
I move on to our right. You'll introduce yourself when you come to the microphone, thank you. And then you. Yeah, no. She's before you. Yes.
Okay, you'll have to forgive me. I'm relying on protocol already established. Good evening, everyone.
Absolutely.
What has been stressed throughout this forum is that Grenada is, quote, a strong independent country, unquote, and that the Privy Council is one of the last vestiges of colonialism. Yet for all, the Queen is still a head of state and still holds a representative on the island in the form of the Governor General. How does the CCJ and the Advisory Committee aim to decolonize and create one united Caribbean in terms of access to justice, that is to say, a unified judicial system, when the systems of governance and cultures of jurisprudence across the Caribbean, for example, Trinidad and Tobago being a republic and Grenada being a constitutional monarchy, are so different? How does the CCJ account for those differences?
That's a very profound question. And the Prime Minister of Barbados indicated to you that they in Barbados and our sisters and brothers in Jamaica have been grappling with that issue. It's not an easy one. I've heard Prime Ministers of Barbados, one after the other, declare publicly that they are going to end this unhappiness in the state of Barbados. And they have left office, and the Queen is still the head of state there. Half a loaf is always better than no bread. Preferably, we should get rid of the monarchy first. I was answering a question over the radio posed to me by Brother Rollo. And I was reminding him, Grenada has the distinction of being the only Commonwealth Caribbean country in which we have had a revolution. Is that not true, my brother? Well, thank you. Now, even during the revolution, they passed a law confirming that the executive authority of Grenada during the revolution resided in whom? Her Majesty, Her Most Britannic Majesty. Why was that so? Why was that so? There are certain realities in life that take more time to deal with than others. I think it was Mr. Branch telling me he had an experience in the States when Professor McIntosh was around. They had gone to the States talking to Grenadians about constitutional reform. And the question about republicanism arose, getting rid of the Queen. And Grenadians in the United States of America, of all places, were asking them, do you have authority to move away from the Queen? So it takes time, sister. It's not only logic. It also has to do with reality. One step at a time, sometimes. Unpalatable as it might be. But we think dealing with the CCJ issue first is going to help us deal with the second issue in due course. That's how we see it.
I have a gentleman here before I come to, Mr. Edwin, and then you'll come. So there are two ahead of you. Yes, sir. Now let me see. Let me see the hands again. Those are the last hands, eh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. So we have 1, 2, 3, then 5. Okay? And then we will close it off for the evening. So we have 8 more questions to take. And given the time, I would ask you all, please keep the preamble short and let's get to the questions, to the meat of it. Yes? Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Greetings to everyone.
Come a little closer. Yes.
Dear God, thanks. Greetings to the panel, the Governor General, and everybody else. Now, first of all, I answer to the name Greenface, but my name is Lester de Souza from St. Paul's.
Yes.
With due respect to my question here is this, that the Governor General, first of all, I'm going back to a part of the same question the ladies there. We want to have the CCJ, but still we have Her Majesty Prison on all these things first. So I think it should be a wider cross of the CCJ by implementing other things in the referendum. Not only just the referendum stating that we want to go that way. Now secondly, or thirdly, I want to find out what help the government will give in to people like me when I have a case to the CCJ. What kind of aid they do to people like in my state, can't afford. How you handle that? And that is all for the time being, to another setting.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Souza.
I share with the last speaker that we both come from the independent Republic of St. Paul's.
So is the chairman. Thank you very much.
So is the chair. The cost of getting to CCJ. That's what the question is about. What is the cost of getting into the CCJ? It is no more than appealing to our own regional court of appeal in the OECS. That's a starting position. More importantly than that is this. Somebody mentioned, may have been Ruggles, that December last year, a case from Guyana was heard and determined by the CCJ. What was the cost? The lawyer stayed in his home, not even in his chambers, downtown Georgetown, in his home, using the advanced video conferencing facilities of the CCJ, and argued the case. What was the cost? Minimal. Because you can stay in Laborie, where you come from, Greenface, and argue your case before the CCJ. You tell me you don't have equipment? Ruggles will then use gadget. And you stay in your home and argue the case. That's ground two. And that's what happened, for example, in the Barbados election case, the voting rights case. They stayed at home and argued the case. Over and above that, the CCJ has a cost schedule which is related to means. So if your means do not enable you to pay the costs, the CCJ has, it's in black and white. They will adjust it for you. You don't have to go to Prime Minister Mitchell and ask for help. What if your case is against the government? You don't want help from him? So CCJ considers all of that. So trust me. Just as Ruggles is on the Board of Trustees and he speaks from up front, I am on the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission of the CCJ, put there jointly by CARICOM and the OECS. So I'm upfront on it. So you don't have to worry about costs. There's also an additional factor that the CCJ comes to town from time to time, just as our own Court of Appeal comes to town. So again, and it's a good thing you asked that question, you know, because the day the British landed here in 1763, they brought with them the Privy Council. We went through slavery. The Privy Council has never ever condemned slavery. At least Lord Mansfield, sitting as the Chief Justice in London, when an American kidnapped an African, he was on a ship, River Thames in London, and some abolitionists got word of it and took habeas corpus proceedings before the King's Bench. And Lord Mansfield said, no one in Britain will breathe slavery. The air of London and Britain is too pure for slaves to breathe in. If you're in Britain, you're a free man. Privy Council ever said so about the Caribbean? No. Have they ever set up advanced video conferencing facilities until the CCJ came on stream? When the CCJ came on stream for the first time, the Privy Council moved out of London. They never sat outside of London before. They went to the Bahamas and they sat for the first time. And what did they say? Don't get rid of us. But when they were striking down the Jamaica Acts, which Parliament in Jamaica passed to move the country out of the Privy Council, what did they do? They struck down those 3 acts and they said they don't have an interest of their own to serve. They don't have an interest to serve. Why then the next year did they head for the Bahamas and plead with the Bahamians and by extension all Caribbean peoples Don't get rid of us. Now, depending upon who is the president of the Privy Council, they give you different signals. So Lord Phillips, when he was there, as the Prime Minister told you, he came right out and he said, time for you people in the Caribbean to have your own final court. We tired with your murder cases and your cost cases. Get out. What will be the position of the new president? Time will have to tell. We don't know. So all of these come together in the question of access to the CCJ. Who will pay the bill? Thank God. The bill, if it comes, will be very small, manageable, and it may not come at all, given the cost rating at the CCJ. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Mr. Edwin. Yes.
Well, thank you. Good night, everyone. Madam, well, I'll say, well, I'm not giving a speech, so I'll just say the protocol has already been established and I follow it. I never knew we had so many anti-colonial fighters in Grenada. And I'm pleased to see the Parliament, the Prime Minister, and the entire gallery anti-colonial fighters. I never knew. I was looking for you in the flogging issue because we have a saving clause in our Constitution where we are keeping these colonial laws on our books. And nobody says anything. You anti-colonial fighters, can you stand up against flogging? I support the CCJ. Mr. Prime Minister, you know that. Yeah? Not just in theory, but in practice, I support the CCJ. Prime Minister Motley, you know, we have a conversation to continue on LinkedIn, on the diaspora bond. But you gave us an invitation for some frank talk, so let's have it. It is not true to say that the Privy Council is expensive. I know it's a surprise. I had a friend who went to the Privy Council this year, and it cost more than my fee in a probate case I have in New York. It's £2,500. You can go there on your own. You pay for your airfare, £95 a night. And if you want to keep the Privy Council, go argue your case. It costs you not $40,000, £40,000. My friend spent £2,500 to go to the Privy Council. I don't support the Privy Council. I'm just giving you frank talk. Integrity is something we have to have in our conversation. And I feel almost like like I need my soul to be saved. Where do I go? I go to a church. I want to be convinced of an idea. Who do I go to? A politician. I respect our political leaders, but I'm sorry, I don't want to hear from you when it comes to the Privy Council, to the CCJ. I want to hear from members, respectfully, members of the bars of Belize, Barbados, Prime Minister Motley, members of your bar, who went and argued these cases before the CCJ, members of the bar of Dominica. I want to hear from the litigants, respectfully. I like my political leaders. I love the present government. Of Prime Minister is a friend of mine, But I don't want to hear about no politician when he comes to the court. Honestly. I think that the pushback against the court is that there will be political interference. And I think there's a risk of waste of the tremendous political capital that our Prime Minister has that he is urging this. And I like the man. The litigants who went to the court, who have experienced the court, who see the value in the court, I think for the educational exercise that this is, so that the Jude Bernards of this world cannot have an opportunity and a platform, I think it must come from members of the bar of these countries that are already participants and signatories to the CCJ. So I hope that this would continue, this education of our people will continue, and I would hope that the folks you bring, Brother Alexis and Ruggles and members of the advisory committee, I hope to hear from litigants who have gone before the CCJ to tell us about their experience in the court, and not from our political leaders. I really would urge that. I think that would go a long way to help us understand, because nobody in Grenada knows how the CCJ works. In fact, we have missed an opportunity to educate Grenadians about the original jurisdiction of the court. We have missed this opportunity. I know we have missed an opportunity. If you want me to sit down, I will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, so one of the five. So we have Sister Claudette. Let me see the other hands again. It's only 4 hands I'm supposed to see, not 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, Sandra, I can't leave you out, so you're going to go last. Thank you very much. All right. So that's it. Yes. Thank you, Sister. Oh, no, yes. No. There's a gentleman here before you, Claudette. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry
about that. I won't be
that.
long. I'm standing already.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, sir. Good night, members of the head table. Please excuse my voice. Prime Minister, I have the after carnival cold. I think they call it a pum pum. Special good night, Madam Prime Minister, and congratulations to you on your victory. Now, I have 2 questions. The first, I would like to direct to the Honorable Attorney General, and the second to Prime Minister Motley and or Dr. Alexis. So, firstly, as Dr. Alexis says, and I quite agree, there isn't much that can be said by way of argument against the CCJ. And I will go further to say that any true Caribbean person will not seriously raise objection to any Caribbean country acceding to the original and the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ. So let me just get that out of the way. Now, Mr. Attorney General, in your presentation, you mentioned that the people of Grenada rely on a well-structured court system comprising the various tiers, magistracy, high court, and then Privy Council. And I here underscore well-structured. And as you know, I am a member of the Bar Association here, and I would say frankly that in my 22 years at the bar, this year is 22 years, I don't think I have ever witnessed a worse situation than we are in now in terms of the operation of the judicial system, infrastructurally and otherwise, and in terms of efficiency. And speaking of the registry, the courts and so on, anybody who's really honest and in the system will agree with me. Now, the state of our system, some of it I think falls squarely at the feet of the administration, the government, in not financing the operations of the court sufficiently, and some of it, like the fact that we do not have a physical court building right now, it's not entirely anybody's fault as such. We have situations that arose that prevented us from operating in the court building. Now, because of the state of things now, we have a lot of people in the society who do not have the level of trust and confidence that they should in our judicial system. So, Mr. Attorney General, I would like to ask you, do you think that it will be best to first address and fix the many problems that we face in our judicial system now, so as to engender greater trust and confidence in the entire system, and so that Grenadians can feel comfortable going to the polls and voting for the CCG, even if it means pushing back the date so that we fix a lot of the problems that you and I know we face presently today? That's the question for you. So I would just like for you to consider that. Now, secondly, second question. During the revolutionary years, as we all know, Grenada delinked itself from the Eastern Caribbean court system, and that was part of the partial suspension of the Constitution on the happening of the 1979 revolution. Then in 1984, the Constitution was restored, and we were returned to what was styled then as full constitutional democracy. But something happened. Our regional court, of which we are part of now, refused to allow us back into the system until the Morris Bishop murder trial was completed. And the intent there, as we all know it, was to close the door on the Privy Council for the 17 or so people who were charged with the murder of Morris Bishop and the other 11 or so cabinet and other government officials. So, to my mind, that was then a manipulation of the system in high places. Now, given the revolutionaries that we are, what do you think would be the risk of something like that happening to us again, or to any other Caribbean country, in the event that we go to the CCJ and then take steps to delink? Do you think there's a chance of us being kept out by people in politics and the judiciary getting together and more or less plotting against those who are before the courts, which is basically what happened in 1984. We went back in 1991. I think Dr. Alexis himself drafted the law that brought us back when we should have been back since 1984. So these are the kind of things that, to my mind, cause people to not have trust and to be afraid to take a chance on a truly Caribbean institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. I sat here very peacefully, and you have thrown some barbs at me. Now, I'm the first to admit that the infrastructure of the courts is not ideal. And it is not because of the fault of the government. You will recall that when the Tillman Thomas government was in operation, they leased the Lime building, which was a good move, because the Lime building on the Caranals provided lots of spaces for the various courts. But subsequently, during the reign of this administration, people complained of illnesses, people complained about moles on the walls, people complained about radiation. So in good conscience, this government couldn't allow that building to be used continuously again. And that caused a problem. So because of the swiftness that was taken to remove judges and lawyers and litigants from that situation, that risky situation, we had to hurriedly try to find space. And so far we have identified quite a number of spaces, and hopefully when the law term begins in September, because there are no courts taking place now, when the law term begins in September, these spaces will be available for the use of the courts. But ultimately, the government sees this as a short-term measure, and it is hoped that in 2 or 3 years' time, permanent spaces will be identified for having a halls of justice. I think the land has already been looked at, and possibly government will take a firm decision on that. And there are plans sitting on the desk of the Attorney General right now, plans for the halls of justice which have been started by the Tillman Thomas administration. Government is a continuum. So the halls of justice plans are there, and once they are suited to the land that has been identified, I'm sure Grenada will have halls of justice in the not too distant future.
Thank you.
Sure. Ms. Joseph, may I respond to you? The act that was passed to get Grenada back into the constitutional judicature was fully litigated at the Privy Council. And the Privy Council ruled that that act was well passed in accordance with the Constitution. And the lordships of the Privy Council saw in that act no attempt to manipulate anybody or anything. I don't think I need to go any further than that.
And I would thank you very much for that. And so, brothers and sisters, we want to get out of here by 10:30, okay? No, I'm saying by 10:30. By 10:30. In other words, no later than 10:30. So I'm asking you to really keep your questions short and the answers short as well. Yes, sir. And then Andre, right, okay, and Pastor Welch. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening to everyone. My name is Wayne James, and I realize that passing laws on that referendum is very difficult. I want to find out if there is a way. I want to find out from the head table if there is a way we can ensure for the future this 2/3 majority that requires for a bill to pass. If you all can find a way to put in the law or to draft a law whereby we can simply have a 51% to replace that of the 2/3 majority. So for the future in going forward, it will be much easier. I believe that there must be a way. If there is a way, I believe we have to try to find that way for the future. Thank you.
Actually, the Constitution Commission of 1985 under Sir Fred Phillips, including my old professor, Professor Carnegie, raised that very point. And that commission recommended that some of the provisions whose alteration now requires referendum approval should be removed from that category. But I don't think I want to say to the government of Grenada today to go to the people with such a proposal. I don't think so. No, for the obvious reason that naturally there will be a charge of trying to remove from the people the power which now lies in the hand of the people to be engaged in constitution reform. So that will require a longer, more profound conversation. Not now.
Thank you, Dr. Alexis. I saw, right, Andre. Then Michelle, then Dave, then Sandra, and that's it. And we good.
Yeah, good night. Just very quickly, I want to use this opportunity to call on the relevant authorities to ensure, as much as possible, that access to justice really means access to justice. Because at the magistracy level, where the ordinary working class man and woman is trying to get justice, many times it is delayed, many times we cannot get judgments, many times we turn up to the court, we waste productive time, we get time from work, we go into the court, cases are not being heard. These are issues that needs to be addressed. I know that it is important to go to the Privy Council and to the CCJ, yes, but to the broad mass of people, many times the access to justice is not there. So I want to use this opportunity to use this platform to call on the relevant authority to do all that is necessary to ensure that our working class people are able to access at the lower level, which most of our people really, really need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that was a point, eh?
Yeah.
So good. So we could move on to Michelle.
With protocol already established, a pleasant good evening. I don't have a question. What I do have is a comment. Now, this is a topic of conversation in most of my classes. In fact, one of our course requirements is a final paper on constitution reform and the CCJ. As an aspiring social scientist, looking at the socio-economic background of the Caribbean on a whole and its citizens, I do believe that the CCJ makes perfect sense. I do believe also that with the CCJ, poor people, of course, will have more access to legal rights. And in my capacity, I would encourage every young person to use the opportunity and be an agent of positive change on November 6th. Lastly, although this area was not emphasized, I also believe that with the urgency in which matters will be dealt with, the CCJ will have an advantage of people would have a peace of mind. And let's be realistic. Sitting in prison and not being able to tell when your case would be tried would have a number of psychological effects. And as our Prime Minister said, the issue of the CCJ transcends all political boundary. Yes. So as a young person, I stand in full support of the CCJ. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we had Andre, we had Michelle, Dave.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening to the head table. This afternoon, we are in pursuit of our independence. And the CCJ, as part of the Caribbean jurisprudence, is an example of our independence. However, I think that we are missing a very golden opportunity, again, in that we have not been able to align the purpose and the process. Because fundamental to the accession to the CCJ is that we have to amend our constitution. The amendment of our constitution has to do with the people. So discussions at regional conferences by Caribbean leaders on the CCJ and signing on to treaties, etc., and not transferring that information to the people is where we are missing the boat. Again, the people don't know. We want to know. What are the avenues? This afternoon, it would have been a very interesting event here if there would have been pros and cons. And we seem to be struggling for the cons. But if we look at the process, the cons are right there in front of us. All right? Why are we not involving a direct educational process that involves discussion in communities? Why do we have to travel to St. George's for this launch? And why am I here partaking in a yes vote campaign as opposed to a debate on the issues? As Grenadians, I think we are absolutely capable, we are bright enough to debate these issues and have normal conversations on them. I see Ms. Prime Minister Miller is back, and I want to welcome you to Grenada. Sorry, my apologies. Prime Minister Motley, I want to welcome you to Grenada and congratulate you on your victory at the polls. And whilst you're celebrating your 100, approaching your 100-day mark, we in Grenada, and in trying to put context to this issue, we are also celebrating almost 3 months since our court has sat. That is the context in which we are ceding to the CCJ to establish context. The court is sitting? Okay. So I am being advised that the court is now sitting so that we have had a solution to the problem. I'm making a comment.
So you have 10 seconds to wrap up the comment.
I want to admonish that the committee takes a look at the approach, involve the people, because at the end of the day, the people will again have to make the decision.
Thank you very much. I would advise that I suspect we are here because this is a launch of the CCJ promotional activity. Of course, you see, we gave the opportunity for everybody to speak and to say the pros and the cons as you see them, so that the debate is happening. It's happening now, and it has started, and it is going to continue over the next few months. Our final person is Sandra. I'm very sorry, my brother, but you're going to work with me, eh? Thank you very much. All right, well, run quick. I'll give you 20 seconds.
Give me 30.
Okay.
Good evening to members of the head table. Just a quick question. I fully understand and appreciate the contributions that politicians may not directly influence the dispensation of justice. But I have a fear that politicians can have an indirect negative influence on the court. And I speak relative to the former Prime Minister of Barbados threatening to remove Barbados from the CCJ if he was re-elected. I am just, as we move on and hoping to get more countries involved in the CCJ, where a referendum is not needed, can politicians remove their, threatening or actually removing their countries have a negative effect on the CCJ in reality? I await an answer.
I like that question.
I would only say that part of the reason perhaps why I was able to follow the example of your government was largely because of the horror of that statement a week before the election and coming after the same Eddie Ventos versus Electoral and Boundaries Commission matter. Caribbean people have a tremendous sense of what is right and what is wrong. And I believe that the public saw in that statement the thin edge of the wedge, so that the people are more often than not right, but they must always have the say. And we may have to decide that we may need to put some protective measures in place that do not allow you to remove yourself from the jurisdiction with just a simple passage of an act of parliament, as in our case. In your case, I'm not sure whether you need a 2/3 to move again. Exactly. But our constitution doesn't require it. What I have done, and what we have agreed to in Barbados, is that participatory democracy only means something when you come to the people. And while we may not be required constitutionally to hold a referenda for a number of things, we have agreed that we would want, on fundamental matters of change in the country, not just legal change, but death penalty, decriminalization of marijuana, on fundamental matters that affect the governance of the country, that we would want to follow the example of consulting with the people. And we think it is the right thing to do. I do agree with Dr. Alexis and the reference to the commission by Professor Carnegie and others, that not everything requires a 2/3 majority, and that there ought to be some things for which a simple majority is necessary, and then other things for which obviously the 2/3 majority is preferable. But these are the kinds of discussions that will allow us to settle future constitutional arrangements across the region, and we can learn from each other. I must tell you that Grenada has been to constitutional law what St. Lucia has been to Nobel laureates. And Grenada has produced some of the finest constitutional lawyers that the Caribbean has seen. Dr. Alexis here, Simeon, who is no longer with us, and for the record, I will state that he would have participated in the drafting of the Republic of Barbados Constitution Bill, which still remains in a file in the Office of the Attorney General, but which we hope will be the basis for future drafting, because it is now obviously 11 or 12 years old. But you have, from this country, produced some of the finest constitutional scholars of the region, and you should take confidence that you can continue to do so.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And so our final question. We need to be out of here very shortly. Thank you very much, Sandra.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening to your panel. I don't have a question.
Okay.
I have a couple of comments. Can you hear me?
Come a little closer.
First of all, let me congratulate Prime Minister Motley. And as a citizen, Prime Minister Motley, I would certainly cheer you winning, but I am not sure that as a citizen we're going to recommend, that you follow the examples of clean sweeps. They send a bad signal. And we have traditionally looked to Barbados for some examples as it relates to civilized democracy. Right. So the comments, and it was a very feel-good afternoon. And Doc, I think we must organize another concert. Your mouth organ playing there remind me of those days. And I think we might want to invite the Honorable Gregory Boeing to be part of that. We'll talk about that. Okay. So we talked a lot tonight, and we talked about independence, lovely sounding and inspiring and so on. Oh, and I really thank Prime Minister Motley for her opening observation, or in speaking about her own experience and missing the inauguration. And I want to say that as citizens, we need to do this. Drunk or sober, mind your business. And the business of government and the business of justice is our business. So we need to mind your business. And I think we should take that out of here this evening as we go forward with this education and campaign. So we talked a lot about independence, and we talked particularly about the judiciary and, Privy Council and the vestiges of colonialism. And I just want to remind us to stick a pin there, because as we look at the economic policies that we are pursuing, we are realizing that we are, going right back where we came from, with different colonizers this time, and all with our own, enabling, so to speak. So I'll just stick a pin on that. Now, independence. Now, let me say, in principle, I support the CCJ. I just have one big hurdle, and I apologize to my brother there. He's very passionate about this. But I'm going to bring it up. I cannot stop bringing this up. And that has to do with more transparency and involvement of people. Now, Doc, I think you represent me, right? You're representing civil society, all of us here. We the citizens. Are you the civil society, one of the two civil society representatives on the Regional and Legal Judicial Services Commission? Anyway, let me make the point. Now, some time ago, it came to my attention, and I apologize to everybody, but I'm telling you, up to now, I have not been able to get over this. And I have to, and I put this out for the proponents, because this is something that, I just can't get around my head out around it. Now, this individual, so we talk about, there's a good structure. It's a good structure, but we have to look at the details and how it's implemented. So this particular individual ended up, as a member, choosing the judges. He was a citizen by investment agent. Also very politically connected. Ambassador to OECS, CARICOM, ACS, sat on the board of governors. And you see, the problem I have with this business of the citizenship by investment program is the sort of scandals and, you don't need this thing when we're talking about our legal and judicial system. And the student of law said it very well. When all else fails, you go to the court, and you really do not want to have these questions being asked. So I am saying that we need to have a process where we don't make these kinds of mistakes. And not only that, I heard even the other day, recently, Prime Minister Mitchell, of course you know who is one of the proponents of that, has now called for an investigation into what happened some time ago. So I think by that action, it says that this concern that I have is a concern that still stands.
And we will need to clear to...
One more, if you would permit me.
Well, you have a minute.
Yeah, we have a minute. Now, drunk or sober, mind your business. Because there is a bill. And it is not just about the title of the bill. You need to understand the content and what the implications for that is. Those implications are. Okay? And I would want to say, let me just share here, that one of the things that has worried me about this bill, and in fact I want to say that Dr. Joseph, you have not, the committee has not acknowledged my letter on that. Maybe I'll have to ensure that I deliver it personally. But that is the issue of enshrining the agreement establishing the CCJ as a constitutional instrument. It replaces the, what you call it now? Anyway, the Court of Appeals, Appeal to Privy Council order with the agreement establishing the CCJ. And I just cannot understand that. Because, and it was raised here tonight, now when we look at this agreement, it says here, amendments can be made. Amendments can be made by the heads of government. So we are having an agreement as entrenched in the Constitution where you have amendments being made, and this is going to be part of the Constitution, and somebody just talked about the awkwardness of that. Now, I have looked at least three of the acts, and I have not seen any of them entrenching the agreement in the Constitution. So I do not know, I am not a legal expert. And the final comment I'd like to make, because
that was one.
Excuse me, I am going to finish. You will not shut me up. Right? You could boo me out if you want. So we talked about regionalism, and I would want to say, Prime Minister Motley, especially as you have been a champion of that, regionalism and Caribbean integration is also about people from the bottom up. And when we look at CARICOM and when we look at OECS, those days past, there is no pomp, no ceremony, nobody remembers. We might hear afterwards that heads met, they signed an agreement. So if we are going to have this thing that will become a reality, we have to start from the bottom up. And I mean, there has to be some sort of special event, something that will tell us that this is a special day for we, the people of the region. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Sister Sandra. And
if I could just say that,
yes,
as I understand what you're embarking upon here, community by community, area by area, this is the kind of conversation that makes the difference. And in fact, this is one of the healthiest examples of democracy that I've seen in the region, because all ideas and all views have contended here tonight. And this is what the Caribbean is about. I have said, and I'm sure that others will agree, and in the same way, there are Barbadians who are watching this at home because it's being streamed. There are Grenadians who are not in here who are watching this. And this is what democracy in the 21st century is about. I hope that we can, at the heads of government meetings, get to the point where the non-caucus items can be streamed, because the truth is that when ordinary citizens see what we go there to discuss, how we want to create a single domestic space in communication, or how we want to create a single domestic space in transport, or how, as we just did in Montego Bay, that we literally are putting in place the framework for the contingent rights, because people do not move without knowing what's going to happen to their spouse or to their children or to their dependent parents. And therefore, the circumstances under which those people can move matter. And if ordinary Caribbean people can see the streaming of our meetings to see what it is we're discussing, I think that you will find that there will be far greater support than currently exists now for the regional effort. So I look forward to those days.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Motley. Brothers and sisters, we have come to the end of this exercise. I would like you to give yourselves a round of applause. Well, what kind of cool applause is that? Give yourselves a good round of applause now. Get the blood circulating a little bit and so on. Yes, I know you could yawn and clap. It's okay. I've seen that. Thank you very much, Terry. You're going to make me yawn too. But folks, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful opportunity for us to debate this issue. There are going to be many more as the the committee is going to be moving around the island and hearing from you. For those of you who are viewing, thank you very much for spending the time with us here in the paradise we call Grenada. And to Prime Minister Motley, thank you very much for your wonderful remarks this evening. I think you really brought it home for us. And so we thank you for that. Folks, get home safely this evening. And, first of all, the Governor General must leave at this juncture, so I'd invite you all to stand and allow her to leave. What's that? What you have at the program? No? Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. So sorry, folks. Yes, no, I can't send the Governor General off yet. Brother Branch, we'll do that very quickly. Your vote of thanks, and then you all have the, what you're supposed to have there. Come. Sorry, Madam Gigi. Come. I caught up with this 10:30.
Thank you very much, Randall. The truth is, I was quietly hoping that you would end the program and I didn't have to do the vote of thanks. Before I do the vote of thanks, though, I have to say that Sandra Ferguson used to be a member of the committee. And the committee met every Thursday. So Thursdays was my favorite day of the week. It was always full of color and very exciting, because Sandra would come and make exciting presentations. She's no longer a member of the committee, and so my Thursdays are not as colorful as they used to be. I wish to thank on behalf of the committee, Your Excellency, the Governor General, for gracing us with your presence. Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister, for your leadership in making Grenada's accession to the CCJ a top priority of your government, and for your steadfast commitment to complete our independence. And I think this evening you confirmed the date of the 6th November as the date of the referendum. It's a date that was suggested before, but you've confirmed it this evening. Honorable Mayor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, on behalf of the CCJ Advisory Committee, I thank you for gracing us and graciously accepting our invitation without hesitation to be the featured speaker at this event to inaugurate the public education program of the CCJ Advisory Committee. No doubt you are quite busy, having been recently elected overwhelmingly in your country, and you're definitely working hard to have a positive report in your first 100 days. I'm sure that you will do so. This evening, you have exceeded every expectation we had, that you will make a presentation that will ignite a positive response by the Grenadian people. And we thank you very much for doing so. The President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, and other members of Parliament, we thank you for your presence and for the role that you expect to play in the process of the referendum. The bill had the first reading, would go for a second reading sometime early in September, and you have a positive role to play in this process. Calypsonian Scorpion for your wonderful rendition of steel pan music and the musical interlude. Mr. Randall Robinson, we thank you not only for your expert management in chairing this evening's proceedings, but also for your humor. I didn't know that you had a talent for humor, and also for leading us in singing the national anthem. Pastor Rache, representative of the Association of Evangelical Churches, for invoking God's blessings. Ruggles Ferguson for your presentation. the CCJ Birds Choir. It is nothing short of miraculous that the CCJ Choir has been able to achieve in 1 week, growing from a mere concept into what we experienced this evening as an excellent display of talent. Originally, all members of the committee were expected to sing, but we each have our talents, and so the more confident ones who were able to sing, and others like Douglas Ferguson, who didn't have a talent for singing, presented instead. He was able to stick to his section. This student, Ms. Genevieve Fleming, we thank you in anticipation of the presentation of a bouquet to our featured speaker. Ms. Cherise Noel, for your remarks. Members of the media, for your efforts in publicizing the event and all the technical details to facilitate this broadcast. The management of the Trade Center. To the members of the advisory committee and all involved, I thank you. And also to Ms. Peggy Nesfield, Esther Fleury, and Marcella Campbell for decorating the Trade Center. We thank you. And finally, to the members of the audience for your presence and your participation and participating in the question and answer session. I thank you.
Yes, and now we have Genevieve to present a bouquet to Prime Minister Mia Mottley. She's a student of the St. John's Anglican Primary School. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And you got my closing remarks already, prematurely. So I would ask you all to stand, folks, and we would allow the Governor General and other dignitaries to depart, and you all get home safely. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.